family. Peace to everyone that has joined us today. It's good to be here. So, if you are here, just let me know how you're feeling. If you see the replay, you can also tell me how you're feeling in the comments. But I'm glad to see everyone here today. I have a great conversation ahead of us. So we are going to jump right in. Let's do a little housekeeping before we jump right in. So if you join me today or if you join me in the replay, this is MaatSpeaks, and I want to welcome you back to MaatSpeaks or welcome you to MaatSpeaks for the first time. So I'm thankful that you're here, and if you're new to this channel or if you need a reminder, here at MaatSpeaks, we are aimed to demonstrate how to maintain, uphold, and build a code and culture through the principles of Ma'at. And we begin by applying those principles to ourselves. Then we extend those principles to our families and ultimately our communities. So as you enter, make sure you hit that like button, share this great conversation that we are going to have today, and make sure that you subscribe to the channel. Also, you can support the channel in a few ways. So here are the different ways that you can support the channel. So you can support the channel by buying me a coffee. Buy me a cup of tea at buymeacoffee.com/MaatSpeaks, or you can donate to my Cash App, which is MaatSpeaks, Venmo MaatSpeaks, or PayPal, which is also Gen Health Revolution. And you can go ahead, join me on Instagram at generationalhealthrevolution.com. That is also the name of my website, which is generational. So here's my Instagram, and then there is my website, generationalhealthrevolution.com. And so we're going to get started with today's conversation. Before we begin, let's see, who do we have here? And as always, thank you, my love husband, divine compliment, and thank you for always being here. I appreciate you for working hard for MaatSpeaks and always contributing and doing your thing in the chat as always. Thank you. And we have, I think it's Jabril, right? It's Jabril, I think. Peace to you. Thank you for coming. Yes, I'm excited too for this one. And I thank you for coming through. I always enjoy you adding to the conversation. Okay, so we're going to get started here. Before we get started, I just want to remind you that as you come into the conversation, that as you enter, prepare to open your minds. So we've been given that filter, and so it's time for us that we heal ourselves. So this channel was created so that we can consciously heal ourselves, name ourselves in a way that is native to who we are, and that we can heal ourselves, our community, and build with one another so that we can create a world that our children and future generations do not need to heal from. So as you know, family, this month we have been talking about spirituality, religious conversations. We've been having those conversations. And so we've been trying to take a deep dive into those conversations. Why? Because in our community, this is one of the things that divide us the most. So again, next week, I will be sharing my story, my departure, how me, my husband, my family, we kind of departed from our religious beliefs. But that will be next week. So it's no secret, the channel is called MaatSpeaks, right? So it's no secret that I practice spirituality, but there might be some misconceptions around my belief systems, and also just helping others on that path, because I think religion is such a touchy topic in our community. It creates this huge divide. And then we have people who are kind of like closet spiritual people, right? So I know when we stepped away from it in the beginning, it was one of those things where you didn't hide it, but at the same time, you didn't really talk about it either. If it came up, it came up, but it was one of those things you just didn't want to go to. So, people, they don't discuss their ancestral altars or their beliefs, or what they're doing with their, spirituality. And so then you try to find like-minded people, because you can't have those kinds of conversations with your family or maybe your friends who you grew up in your spiritual system that you were brought into as a child. So I came from a very dogmatic family. So for a while I just did not want to discuss it, or was kind of like, I just don't feel like having that conversation right now. So that's one thing that we do need to do. In just a moment here, I do have to send a message really quick to my husband. Hold on, y'all, sorry about that. Just a minute, y'all. So that's the thing, when it comes to this whole spiritual religious conversation, is really having the conversation so that we can see if we can actually build together. So I invited some really dope brothers to the panel tonight. I respect them a lot. One of them did say that he had an emergency, so he most likely will not be showing up tonight, which I hate that. But peace, love, healing to your family. But we are gonna have the conversation. So we're going to speak a lot. We speak a lot in our communities about building institutions, right? So if these institutions are built, because that's what we say we lack institutions in our community. So if we build these institutions, right, will they come? So we're going to get into that. But each person that I invited to this conversation, not only do I respect, but I know that they have a love for Black people. I know they have a love for the community, and I know that it's about that they're putting in work in their own way. So with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and invite my panelists here up to the stage. But before I do that, I am going to shout out some more people who came through. Peace to my sister Hanifa. Thank you for always coming through, showing your support, showing your love. Peace to you, sis. Okay, I got it right. Thank you. And peace to my brother here. And I thank you for coming through as always. Thank you. Peace to you, Crypto Balls. Thank you for coming through. I appreciate you. And let's see, Jacob. Thank you, Jacob, for coming through. Appreciate you. Love seeing you here tonight in the chat. That's true, you played the fool. And let's see if Liberated Soul Rebel. Much love to you. And newly subscribed, thank you for subbing to the channel. And yes, spirituality, something that is near and dear to my heart, so we are going to talk about it. Yes, showing love for Brother Talawa. Peace to you. I think you are new in the chat, so thank you for coming through. Peace to you, and I appreciate you for coming through. So we're going to get started. I'm going to invite the brothers on up to the platform, and we're going to have this conversation. So peace to my brother Talawa. Thank you for coming through. Peace to my brother Brandon, and peace to my brother Omawale. Peace to you guys. Thank you for coming through. Right. So thank you. So we're going to start off the conversation. I think that one thing that we can agree on is that we have a common goal. And our common goal is that we want to see better for our people. So it looks different, I think, in a lot of different ways. But the question is, should it look different? So we're going to get into it. So here's the thing, there's a divide in our community, and we very rarely look at the origin of these divisions. we can look at the divide in like our everyday conversations, like celebrities, politics, whatever, lots of division that we have when we're having conversations. So even like last week, we kind of talked about the Kyrie Irving situation. So if you ask different people, like probably each one of us would have a different take on even that conversation or that topic. But there's a huge divide because of our spiritual systems, our beliefs, and how we in our spiritual systems, religion, spiritual systems, it tells us how we relate to the world. It tells us what is sacred, even on the subconscious level. So I do think it further divides us, not just in our conscious thought, but also in our subconscious thought. So, like spiritually, I could say like Buddhism, right? Like I could say that that has some great principles. But if I see the deity, right? If I see the deity, if I walk into the Buddhist temple and it does not relate to me, then it also affects my worldview. So there's a divide because while we have these collective experiences, trauma, we are relating to our environment and to our world differently, which leads to the question, can we work together when we have these different spiritual systems, these different beliefs, which leads to other things being different? So I shared this slide before, and I want to just quickly go over the slide. Last time I had a spirituality kind of versus a religion kind of conversation, I shared this. And so we have these different um, things here. So we have epistemology, ontology, and axiology, right? And so the study of knowledge and knowing. How do we know what we know? And then we have ontology, which is the studies the nature of human being existence as individuals in society and the universe. So who are we? What are we? And what are we here for, right? And so axiology, which is the study of values. And so you can break those down into ethics, right or wrong, studies of value in human action. So a lot of these things that we even talk about, it goes into our value systems. And so I want this kind of to be the basis of the conversation because what values, so when we look at axiology, right, we see what values or outcomes will result from our research. So how we research has a lot to do with our personal values and what has shaped us and how we actually do the research. So when we have conversations about spirituality, a lot of things that come up is the fact that one person may be researching based on what their experiences from childhood. So a lot of times when we have these debates, in a sense, it's like, well, I'm bringing certain things to the conversation. And a lot of people bring, let's say the Bible. They bring the Bible to explain the Bible, right? Like there's not a lot of other things that they're bringing to understand that. Even when we start talking about, well, um, examining different texts and things like that, where are we in that? Where are we as African people in that story, in that history? Even when we talk about the Hebrew language, where is that our language? Is that our tongue? So a lot of these things when you see here at axiology, it says, should we seek to understand or seek to change the world for the better? So that's a great question that we can even ask ourselves. Should we seek just to understand or should we seek to change the world for the better? So then this goes into morality, right? So I want to start the conversation off there with morality. I talk a lot about morality, um and our basis of morality. Like, where do we get our morality? And so, Brandon, I want to start off with you because our last conversation that we had, you mentioned that Christianity, it gave us our own morals, boundaries, and guidance. So ultimately, like when we left the church, we let the church go, our community started to collapse. So that was kind of the last thing that kept our morals together. So I would like you to expound on that. So expound on that for me.
Sure, absolutely. Greetings, everybody. It's good to be on the panel with the three of you and to share some ideas and some thoughts. I will preface my comments with saying it wasn't the only thing that happened. So I'm not saying Christianity was our saving grace or anything like that.
Mm.
But when we were collectively practicing a religion, it did give us morals and a value system that we operated under. And I would say that really Generation X, um, so and the boomers are probably the last two generations that actually benefited from the Christianity value system that was there. But that the church changed and it went more towards prosperity and not necessarily towards gospel, and we started to see an unraveling in the community happen. I think that when you have a collective group of people who are operating under either a spiritual system or religious system, it does provide some benefits. But we know as Black folks, Christianity has also provided a lot of harms to us as well. I mean, that is not the religion necessarily that we crafted for ourselves here as we were being developed into what we now call African Americans or Black folks. But I do think that there is a power in that. And when I'm in the community, when I'm doing work with folks, there's still um, kind of resemblance of religion, but there's not the practice there. I mean, folks don't even get dressed to go to funerals anymore. I mean,
Mm.
they'll show up in pajamas and stuff. So when I see that, and when I see how we treat one another, how we're very quick to just snap off on things. I think about where's the humanity in ourselves? Like, what happened? How do we get to this point? When I see 9-year-olds packing, pistols with switches on them and extendo clips, I'm saying, what happened? Where does this 9-year-old feel like they have to protect themselves with this level of armory, and what happened to our family system? So something took place, and I think once we got away from Christianity, that was one of the kind of dominoes that set off this whole thing to where we are today.
Okay, so before I kind of go deeper with that, Brother Talawai, what do you think about that? Do you think that it had to do with um us getting away from Christianity? Where do you think that the morality, kind of like that moral compass that we had, where what happened?
Mm, in my opinion, I think how do I put it? I would say no. I think the issue is it's the overall, Eurasian view. I think we are on like a spectrum, two ends of the Eurasian way of thinking.
Mhm.
There's the left spectrum, which is like liberal, Marxist, secular liberalism, and then there's the right, which is, conservative, more clinging to Judeo-Christian structures or ways of thinking. And
Mhm.
we're always swinging between those pendulums, but we're never on our terms when we're in that type of setting. So, for example, you might have structure with, going to church and certain things, but you still get Afrophobic values, right? Very Afrophobic, anti-Black values. So, for me, they're both the same. The root is the same problem, just in different ways.
Mm, okay. Um, so Brother Omawale, I want you to kind of add on to that. The whole idea of the kind of that our moral compass, like kind of when we depart from these systems, right? Like we depart from the church, because I have an idea of kind of like what we put into the actual system more than we put into the people. So do you think it's the actual departure, or do you think it comes more from the less communal aspect of of us as a people?
Yeah, it's yeah, I'm smiling just because this is it's an interesting conversation, but I think it's a bit of both. You know what I mean? I do think when we talk about like a moral compass, that points you to your true north. I think it would be very hard to to deny the reality that our experience here, our sojourn here in America, pardon me, the Black church played a very significant role in our socialization, in terms of behavior, um, value systems, things that we did or that we did not do. So I think that we can accept the reality
Mm-hmm.
that Christianity, in many ways, it harms you as a black person. It harms your psyche. It harms your sense of self. It harms your sense of racial esteem.
Mm-hmm.
However, having a moral code that was given to us by the Christian church, we did operate, those of us who were under that particular banner, it allowed us to operate in a way where we had somewhat of a cultural code.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that when we moved away from that and got very individualized, that cultural code started to deteriorate. And I was actually having this conversation with my wife recently that, um, yes, Christianity was very harmful, but one of the things that I can think back to is that, it gave you this sense of, what's the word that I'm looking for here? That retribution would had to be paid for like your wrongful acts. And
Okay.
that's something that like our people, because we don't have any like thought or religion, like we no longer have. Like for an example, I remember when I was a young person and I was a bit wayward and I would be doing things that like I knew I wasn't supposed to be doing. Like I knew, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I would literally be doing the things that I was doing. And I'll be praying at the same time, like, man, God, just
Right.
let me get out of this. You understand what I'm saying? So I think that that kind of like moral compass, that sense of right or wrong, that sense of condemnation, we
Mm-hmm.
did that. The church did provide that for us, although it wasn't perfect. And I don't think that it was meant to suit our long term needs, but I don't think that we can deny that it gave us a moral compass as a community. So,
Okay. So with that, uh the because I was thinking about this, and it was something that just like came to me when I was, in conversation. And I was thinking about how we kind of, because I think we do say that a lot. We say that this particular thing, say we needed it in that time. So we needed
Mhm.
religion, or we needed Christianity in a particular time in the past. Because I think we've said that, when it comes to survival, we say like when we were in survival mode, we kind of needed survival, but we only need those things, right? We only need those aspects if we're in a toxic place anyway, right? So I think that when it's kind of like how Europeans they sell you, well, they give you the fear, they give you the fear of whatever it is, whatever disease it is, they give it to you and then they sell you the cure. So I think a lot of times we kind of I don't know if it's a misplacement, but it's a kind of a misplacement of what we needed. So it's like the
Sure.
spiritual system. And so we say that it's the actual religion or the Christianity that saved us in a time that we needed it, rather
Yeah.
than maybe it was actual, how they say like the church is not the building, it's actual the people.
Right.
So it was the people, it was the coming together, it was the rallying behind something, because even when we say in the civil rights time, we came more together as a community. So is it that we did that because of the religion, right? Or did we do that because it just gave us something to rally around, to rally behind? So I would like anybody can kind of jump in on that, because I just think that I don't know. I feel like maybe the residuals that we have, because I'm saying, I say it too. I say that
Mhm.
we needed it, but is it the residuals that we have from Christianity, from religion, that makes us continue to feel like, or even the fact, it's kind of like when you leave something toxic,
Mhm.
you'll say something like, oh well, it helped me to become a better person, right?
Sure.
And so is it that it makes us feel better that we put that time? Because I say all the time, if it, Christianity was just a part of my walk, right?
Mhm.
But was it necessary? you know
Sure.
because didn't we already have that moral compass? Didn't we already have morality as a people already? Is that something like we see? I have a
Yeah,
toddler, so I already know that he knows there's certain things that are right or wrong. Now there
right.
are some things that he does not know, but most of the time, like he gives you that look, like I know I did something wrong. So isn't that something that is already
Yeah.
in within us?
I think so. I think so. But real quick, Europeans they never give you a cure. They only give you treatments. So
Right.
they don't cure.
That's
They
true.
give you treatments for sure. But I think you're onto something. I think it's innate in us that definitely we have morals, value systems, but the church served as kind of a vessel or a vehicle for those things to display. I mean,
Mhm,
even in Christianity, we worship different than white folks or anybody else who practices Christianity. There's nothing like going to a gospel church. And I
mhm,
think that that's our innate ability, that's our culture and our heritage that we bring into that vessel. But what happened was when the masses of us, especially the men, left
mhm.
the church, we didn't replace it with anything. And I think that that's
Gotcha.
the thing. What Omawale was saying is like we got people out here who are on individualistic mindsets, and the crazy part about it is it's individualistic, but it's still communal. It's just
Mhm,
destructive because nothing is there to safeguard and to kind of bring us and reel us back in. So when people are out doing things that they probably shouldn't be doing, there's nothing there to say, "Hey, man, do something." There's nothing. There's not a thought in the back of your head or a thought of, is God or any other universal being looking down on me. It's just like I'm about
mhm.
to get it how I live, and whatever happens, happens, and good luck. And I think that that's where we get in trouble is we didn't replace with anything. So we have it. I mean, you
Yeah.
see it in little kids all the time. We just don't have anything to channel it through. So yeah, I'll
Mm.
pass the mic.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. If and I guess the next question I have to that is then now it's kind of like now what? So who and what dictates our morality? So who and what? Now we're at the point that we're at. So who does that? Who dictates it?
I
Thank
would
you.
say, oh, sorry.
There you go, ahead, brother. You got it.
I would say it's whether it's the church or the do whatever you want culture, it still comes down to Eurasianization. That's the bottom line. But to something Brandon said that was very important about, structure. I do think structure is important, but I would add to that is whose structure. And I think what we saw, I guess, pre 1960s, whether pre 1960s in this part of the world and in other parts of the world where you have Africans in European majority countries, I think what it is, you have the conservatism, very
Hmm.
conservative thinking, and now we're seeing millennials. Like I'm a millennial. I know. Oh well, he has the term. I guess he's geriatric or millennial. I guess there's a split in the millennial classification, but I don't think I'm on the geriatric end. I'm not sure.
I'm on the tail end, bro. I'm knocking on the door, Gen X.
Yeah. He's
Yeah,
geriatric at
I'm
the bottom.
geriatric with him. We getting our AAP card together. So
Okay. So two geriatric, and I think I'm either in the middle or lower end of the millennial scale. But I think people, particularly at about my point and younger, are very into the liberal paradigm, not so much the conservative paradigm. So I think both of these European Eurasian paradigms have problems. They're just different types. But going back to Brandon's point about structure, I think it's always constructive that, and I think this is where spirituality becomes important because we have to know what are our terms, or rather, we have to remember or relearn what are our terms. And that's where you get into African spiritual systems and the importance of them, not just only in their ritual capacity, but also in their social, economic, and political capacity, I would say. Because once you're familiar with that, this conversation about church becomes largely irrelevant. You see that in many ways, the liberal and the church thing are different types of diversions.
Mm. So I do hear that, but the conversation is about working with our non-spiritual people. So when I had a conversation last year, we were talking about this. It got to be very divisive. These spirituality religious conversations, they get divided to the point where it's you don't walk away feeling like you can accomplish anything. So I know brother Amawale, you have talked about, you know, because you do like, because I'll admit, you know, I can be a little extreme. Well, I don't, not extreme, I don't like that word. Radical, I use the word radical in my thinking. So a lot of times it I'm just like, we got work to do. We it to me, we're at a point where it's like it's die, you know, it's do or die in essence, especially for the next generation. We see the deterioration of, you know, and I get to the point where I'm just worried, you know, worried for my kids. So I know you say like you give grace, and I understand even with family members, because we exist in a family where we're we are the minority, like it's us, you know. So we have had to kind of make our family or find our tribe with other people. So I know that you say that you give a lot of grace with that, but how do we that, like, because morality, I think we don't have a firm grasp on what morality is, because I think the Christianity or the religious view of morality is quite different than the morality that we should be accepting. So how do you how do you how do you make room for that, brother Amawale?
Professor Talawa, you might gotta mute your mic. I'm getting a lot of air over this joint, but so it's you know it's an excellent question, Sister Mod, and my response is I guess it's a simple response. It comes down to, can I build what I'm attempting to build?
Mm,
Um, can I achieve what I hope to achieve with only the people who think like me?
okay.
And the reality is, it's not possible. Um, and I think that it just takes a little bit of wisdom to understand that we have to use all of the pieces that we have on the board, and many of those pieces are going to be folks who are at different parts, in their journey. But it doesn't mean that they can't be um, helpful to you,
Mm,
right? So there are black folks who are in the church. There are black folks who are in different religious beliefs, like things of that nature. And for me, I, for one, you can't influence people if you don't have a relationship with them. And
mm,
if you're too, let's use the word pious, right? If you're too pious,
mhm,
I think you run the risk of cutting people off who, if you actually had relation with them, you may be able to influence them through your actions, because it's hard to influence people with words. Like your actions, right? Love is an action, right?
mm,
The things that I do, the building that I'm doing, the working that I'm doing, these are all reflections of the love that I have for my people.
right.
Right? Somebody asked me before, like, Omawali, what do you believe in? And my belief is simple. I believe in African people. I believe in our ability, right, to achieve our victory. So that's something that's very simple. Now, when it comes to me personally, like my philosophy, my spirituality, because
Mhm,
if you understand yourself to be a spirit, anything that you do to cultivate self is, in a sense, a form of spirituality, right? So it just gets very, you have to understand that that man, you know man makes, his own religion. Man makes his own god, right, to serve his interests. And I don't think that Christianity serves the interests of our people, but I recognize that there are a lot of our people who are still held captive by Christianity. So
right.
in the interim, while they are there, I find a way to work with them where I can, right?
Mhm,
I guess the best example I can give you of building, I work for, a corporation that does extremely well.
mhm,
Um, And I can tell you that of the thousands of people who are also employed by this corporation, we don't agree, we don't have the same spiritual beliefs, but we operate based upon a code of ethics, a code of conduct,
Mm-hmm.
um, and we have a goal in mind. So it's about finding those people who can reasonably, align with what your goal is and want to assist you in getting there. And I just have recognized that some of those people are just not going to believe what I believe. They're not going to be invested in the things that I'm in, but I'm not going to turn them away. And I'll give you a perfect example of a group who does this. The group that started Zionism,
Mm-hmm.
they don't care if you practice the faith. They don't care if you're Orthodox. Like I know, those people in that community who say like, "Oh, I'm not a religious J word," or "I'm not," I'm a J, but I'm not a religious one. I don't believe in what they believe, like yada yada yada. But at the end of the day, they all are operating based upon a code, and they all support one another in some way. Some like because they understand that their protection is in the group.
Right.
That's how it is for me with Black people, right? I think that our traditions that were developed by the ancestors are the best of what we have to offer, and I think that they are best for our group. But I just recognize that everybody is not there yet, and I have a finite amount of energy, resources, and time. So I just
Mm-hmm.
have to use wisdom to figure out how I use that time while I'm here to get the job done and push things down the road. So that's just the way that I approach things as somebody who's an organizer and somebody who puts their hand in the dirt. I
Mm-hmm.
lean on pragmatism a lot to get shit done.
Mm-hmm. Mm. So I am gonna let Brother Emo up. Peace, brother. Thank you for joining us.
Hey, my guy,
Peace, peace. How y'all
young
doing?
young Tupac.
Greetings, sir.
Hotep emo.
So I guess before Emo chimes in, well, you know what? No, because that's gonna kind of take the conversation somewhere else. So Brother Emo, I want you to kind of add on to the morality conversation, as far as if our morality, right? Like, because the way that I view it, and I get what everyone says. I understand what you're saying, brother Omawale, and I agree with it. I do agree. But I think the issue is never from the spiritual. I just, this is my observation, and I'm harder on Christians because I come from Christianity, and I know what it's like to be a Christian. I know how dogmatic. I come from a dogmatic family, so I get it. So I guess, to me, the observation, and any Christian who wants to come up can come up and have the conversation. But what I see is more of, it's not the spiritual folk who don't know how to put their spirituality to the side, because to me that's not that it's my personal walk, right? It's personal to me. It's more of, because religion calls for conversion, then it's hard for them to put it to the side. So how does morality, from that end, from the religious aspect, how does it interfere with us who are more of us, spiritual, in our view of morality? Like, how can we work together, or do you think we can work together in that aspect of morality?
You're asking me?
Yes, brother Ima. Uh-huh.
Okay. Well, I mean, Christianity demonizes African spirituality. So, so yeah, I don't see neutral ground in terms of it. And I mean, I've grown up identifying myself as an atheist, but my grandfather confronted me with the question as a child and said, "Well, if you're not religious, where are you going to get your morality?"
Mm.
And to me, I took offense to that. I was like, "You're saying if I don't believe in an imaginary white man on a stick, that I don't have morality?" Like that was the way I understood that question when my grandfather asked me at a young age. So ever since then, that's part of your spiritual journey. That's part of you figuring out what does it mean to be a moral person, and do does Hebrew folklore have a monopoly on morality? You see, so for me, the way I saw that is that that has to be a contradiction, because my people, African people, are older than the folklore that people are saying has the monopoly on morality.
Mhm.
And so for me, the way I see it is morality is what keeps you um, in touch and empathetic to your own people, to your own family. So any kind of any kind of religion that alienates you from seeing your own people as is your priority, then that's a problematic religion. And a lot of the time, the problem with a lot of these religions is that it orients us towards wanting to be other people in the name of being human or something universalistic.
Mhm.
So so you'll hear Christians talk about everybody else, but never black people. And by the time we get to black people, now we're talking about curses and people being wicked and people being demons.
Mhm.
So to me, I don't see any neutral ground on the matter. I think Christianity is anti-black to its core, but people don't want to speak that firmly about religion because people are invested, people are trapped, people are imprisoned by it.
Mhm.
So I mean, I don't pick any bones about talking about religion. I think that shows you the difference between scam artists and people who know what they're talking about.
Mhm. Okay, so
Rapping deacons. You know,
that goes into the whole idea. So I know that a lot of times we tread lightly on who we call um kind of what we call a race traitor, right? So to me it's a slippery slope, because if you are Brandon made a great point last conversation we had on here, and he said we are the Yurugu, right? So we understand that concept, then we understand that if they are a danger to us, that means that anyone who's not intentionally working on their mindset is a danger to us as well. So I'm going to start with Brother Talawa on that and kind of understanding. So what what is, and I won't use the word traitor because I think that can be I mean, you can use whatever word. We could just go, let's just use the word dangerous, right? Because I think dangerous is a spectrum. I think traitor is a spectrum too,
how
but
about how about misoriented or disoriented?
okay, okay. And so with that, what at what point, so we have people in our family who are what we would consider people that are, they're not there yet, and we say that let's wait on them. And so I have people I love, I care about, that are not there yet, so I get it. At what point though are these people dangerous, in a sense, to what we're trying to do, what we're trying to build?
When they're
Brother Tello,
harmful.
I want to start with you.
Okay, well, I think to that question, funny, me and my wife have this conversation all the time. We're learning. We're learning. I think there's personal dangers. Like I would say personal dangers, like for example, as all y'all on the panel know, you know, I've just entered fatherhood not too long ago. So, me and my wife, we have to be very careful with family members, certain types of, counterproductive influences, right? So we have to be very clear about your boundaries, and you just defend your boundaries. But also, a constructive thing to keep in mind sometimes, and this is what a couple of elders have told me, and Omawale talked about action, and Brandon talks about action, I think, as well in some of his commentary. Sometimes when they see you, our people, when they see you doing things that are constructive, effective doing it their
Mm-hmm.
way, it starts to change them. Like, for example, I had a naming ceremony for my son, and I made a dress code mandatory. Me and my wife both agreed, made a dress code mandatory because, they know I don't play. You can't romp with me, right? I'm very serious about certain things. But, and, there was always, pushback. There were some people pushback. I said, nope, not doing it. But part of it is, and this is where you get into now politics. I don't just say do it because so and so said so. This is everything's connected to the political objective of Black empowerment, right? Reason why we wear our clothes, right, and not theirs. There's a reason, right? Things like that. And I think, and my ceremony, I made sure there was room for political conversation there. Like, I prioritize it. So, that's a whole other conversation. But the response of certain family members, you'd be surprised. You'd be very surprised. Like, I never thought I'd hear certain family members say they like, an African name. And then they start asking you questions. It's not always negative, right? You're gonna get a mixed bag, but a lot of it is predicated on to what Brother Omwale said about your actions. Because a lot of things I do, I just kind of do them. But I'm very clear about my boundaries. So that's in the personal realm.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when you get into now organizing, political actors, I think that's because, yeah, I think sometimes we have to distinguish between that. Now, when you're organizing, political actors, right, or your institution building, like you have organizational spaces. We in Wall, we're in Afrocentricity International in varying capacities, right? I think that's where now we have to assess. Now, that's where the value system becomes very important because we have very clear political objectives. And what you'll find with people, when they're in these systems, these Abrahamic deification systems or Abrahamic cultural deification systems, some people you'll see how attached they are or how not attached they are to it by how they respond to you. Because sometimes with some of our people, it's just once they see the corrective, it's like that. Some people, it doesn't make a difference. So I always think, even at both on the personal level and the organizing level, there's always a mix and match. But also, I think we have to have a certain level of patience. I think patience very important in both those realms. Like, even when organizing, you might not have a whole lot of people on your side, but every mickle make a muckle. Sometimes you have to take the patience and go step by step and be willing to start with a small pool in some cases.
Yeah.
You have to be willing to start with a small pool and kind of work your way up. But what I will say with the religion issues, we should be at a point, those of us who are, in, who are not in the, Abrahamic stuff, we should be able to have in varying levels some systematic explanation for inquiring minds as to why we detach from, Islam or Christ insanity or whatever. I think our people need the why part. Just telling people, no, don't do that. That's part of it. If you don't have that systematic, I don't mean like a thesis when I say systematic, but
Mm-hmm.
if you don't have that explanation, that's important. Like, just to make a brief comparison, when I talk about bedroom colonialism, it's not good enough to just tell, our sons and daughters to, not date, white people. We have to make sure that they see value in blackness, that's not even a thought. They see value in Africanness, that's not even a thought,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's the same thing with our system. So we have to talk from an affirming standpoint more so than play defense. Play defense when they're actually, coming at you, but don't start off with defense.
Yeah, because if you start with defense, you're just doing the anti thing or the not thing or the atheist thing.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
if you're just saying not this, not that, not this, not that,
Mm-hmm.
then people don't know what Taliban was saying. They don't know the affirmative. They don't know the positive. They don't know what they should be doing. They don't know what they should be returning to. You see, so they just know not this, not that. So I don't want to hear you. You see.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think the what I think about though, right? Like, because um there is a sense of, I think, within across the board, not just with religion. There's a kind of a high that we get off of things. So it's this emotional connection that we do have. So it can be difficult to even if I do explain the why. So they definitely have to be down that path, you know. So even when I talk to people about their health, and I talk about holistic measures and things like that, they still have to be going down, they have to be ready for the information, because if somebody is addicted to food, then they're not going to be able to really, they don't care about the why. You know, they might care a little bit about the why, or maybe it has to get to the point where they're sick for them to actually care. And then some people, even when they do get sick, they still don't care, they still have that addiction. So I think we have to even understand how strong the religion is, how strong these things that in our society that we're addicted to. And it's not just religion, right? It's entertainment, it's food, it's a lot of different things that we are addicted to. So even when you break down the why, it can be difficult with that. So Brand, I'm glad I want you to touch on that.
Well, my thought goes to, what about the folks who are not Christian? They don't have any religious base. How
Mm,
do we reach them? Because I think that's even scarier. And I do a lot of work with young people. So when I say young people, I'm talking 25 and under. And many of them, they don't have, I mean, they may have some residuals from Christianity, like they might, wear a cross on their chain, get a tattoo, things like that,
mhm,
maybe a scripture. Outside of that, they're not practicing any Christian value systems. And my thought is, how do we reach them with African spiritual systems? You know, it's a difficult thing to do. I think there's ways to do it, but it's gonna take some finessing in order for it to happen. Like I think of somebody, and I hate to even bring up somebody's name, but I think of like a Tariq Nasheed and how he's been able to just add language into the common dialogue, a lexicon of Black people that comes from the conscious community. Like, it's gonna take people like that. Unfortunately, I don't think that's the right person, but it's gonna
mhm.
take people like that in order to reach a demographic that doesn't have the spiritual base that we have. So
No,
Mm,
when you hear things like being on code, that comes from Mr. Fuller and Dr. Wellesley. Like, that was
yeah.
not, people didn't talk like that 10 years ago. But where did they get it from? It came out of the work of Tariq Nasheed. That's how he popularized, make that popular. So when it comes to spiritual systems, how do we get folks to listen to Dr. Kaba? How do we get folks to invest into African spiritual systems? Because to be honest with you, Christianity in the Black community is losing strength with particular generations. So, our elders, yeah, they're there, but the generations behind them, those other half of millennials and down, they're not as there as much. So I feel like we may be looking back so far that we're forgetting that these folks who are coming up, there may be an opportunity to jump on them and invite them into an opportunity.
Yeah, I mean,
let's see, let's see.
for me, ultimately, what this conversation is about, right? If we are operating within the function of leaders, it
Mhm,
becomes about like how do we influence the behavior of the people that we're trying to reach, right? Because we're gonna, we're gonna make decisions based upon our inputs. So it's right to be critical of Christianity. I think all of us on this panel understand the danger and the damage, right, that Christianity like has done to our people. And we understand that if our people had a better source of knowledge, right, that they would make better um, actions or decisions just based upon those cultural inputs that are fed into them. But the reality is they are where they are. And we're in an environment where there's a significant amount of competition for their mind space, right? There's a significant amount of messaging that's also trying to influence their behavior, right? Let me take it back to like the corporation example. Corporations spend, just one individual corporation can spend billions of dollars just trying to influence the behavior of the consumer, right? They want the consumer to do what? To act. Act in whose interest? And the interest of the corporation. How is that done? By spending with the corporation. So they target the consumer, they study the consumer, they do market research, right? And they are competing with other people who also want the consumer to act in their interests, right? So they're spending billions of dollars sending you targeted messages to influence your behavior. So those of us who are trying to build, understanding that our people already have a software uploaded into them, how do we hack that software? How do we get them to act in our interests? So my perspective is like, don't make your job harder. You understand what I'm saying? Like you have to first and foremost be in relationship with those people. Right. You come out of the church, my aunt, and in the Christian faith, they say where you can find Christ at. Well, Christ is going to be among the sinners, the drunkards, right? He's going to be around among the people that needs the message. So for me, I don't really want to be around like conscious minded folks. I don't really want to be around folks who are like pious. I want to be around people who don't think like I think and don't believe like I believe, but them having access to me, I can potentially influence them to act in a different way. And if they see the things that I profess benefiting me, right, that might make it more attractive to them where they'll come closer and want to learn a little bit more about it because they see it working in my life. They see it benefiting my life. But the thing is, they don't see that. Like we talk about religion, but we've also saw that historically, I mean the Garvey movement, the seventh tenet in their constitution was to civilize the backwards tribes of Africa. So they were very anti African in their Christian sentiments. But in terms of building institutions, they managed to build more with less than what we can build with all of our knowledge, our insight, like that we have today. So it really just comes down to like, what are your goals? Who are you trying to reach? And you asked the question at the beginning, can we build with people who don't think like us?
Mm-hmm.
Question becomes, can you build what you're attempting to build with only the people who think like you? That's
So I have a question on that because the the reach part, because if we're talking about building institutions, who are the institutions for?
so institutions are meant to serve the interests of a community,
Mm-hmm.
right? So communities have to be given definition, right? So typically, communities are people who share a common historical experience or that descend from a common like ancestor, right? They have something, right? There's some level of cultural material or experience that makes them see each other as like familiar. I am you, and you are me, right? I think
So
that
is Christianity that for black people?
No, I think we already passed the fact that Christianity is not ours, but we're saying that that's where our people are. So it's about how
Well,
do
I'm
you.
asking if that's the gluon for our people.
No, it's not. So the question is our like the question that I thought that was emphasized for tonight's conversation is, can we build with people who are there? And I know, just from talking to you, Professor Emo, you of the mind that like you definitely ain't trying to evangelize and reach them. Like you are like
You
a.
have to build institutions and they can come join you.
How do you get them to join you if you don't go out to bring them in?
If you like the same way, the reason you have so many black Christians is because you have so many black churches standing. Now, how many houses for African spiritual traditions do are left standing publicly? How many people practicing Abasom or Candomblé or Voodoo or Santeria, or let me name many more? How many of those houses stand openly in
You
the
didn't
United
answer.
States?
You didn't answer my question.
No, I'm getting there. The point I'm making is there's a holy war against African people. So our people still practice these traditions, but we do it in secret, or we do it with shame, or we do it in confusion because we don't have institutions that can stand like churches and mosques.
Let me ask you a very clear question then, because I want to put some I want to put a fence around this question so you can kind of like tackle it head on. Question that I'm asking you. We say we cultivate spiritual institutions that you are referring to. You've stated that you don't believe in going out to the notion that if we just create this institution that our people are going to pull up because the institution is there. I think that that's a fallacy. I think that you literally have to go out to get them, and not only that, you have to convince them that what they have currently doesn't work. So this is the art of persuasion. So you're saying that you don't think that we should be having to persuade, or to use another
You
term,
have to persuade.
evangelize.
I don't believe in proselytizing. I don't believe in being a missionary. I think the thing is, you let people go their way. I don't think you corner people and coerce and manipulate people into believing what you believe. And that's what the Christians and the Muslims have done to African people.
Yeah, well, yeah, I think that's where the fundamental difference comes down to, because ultimately, like, if you just understand it's the social psychology of groups, much of what we believe, even if we had the right beliefs, the way that those beliefs are going to be transferred from generation to generation is through the socialization process. And there's penalty, right, for people who don't uphold those beliefs, right? There's
Yeah,
there's
who enforces the penalties?
the people within the group. But you're saying you allow people to go like they're. What I'm telling you is it actually takes effort, what you refer to as proselytizing, or being
Yeah,
mission.
effort in the wrong direction.
No, I'm saying that if you're trying to advance Africans, like if you're saying that what the people presently believe is incorrect, then that means you need a strategy to reach them to correct or reform or change, transform what they currently believe. If you're saying just let them go their own way, then you just creating an institution.
I
It's
don't
not.
think I'm gonna save the world.
All right. Well, I'm not talking about saving the world. I think that we're having a conversation about nation building, right? So if we're having a conversation about nation building and liberation, it definitely won't happen with the five people on this screen. And it's not going to happen with the small hand of people who think like I think, or the small amount of institutions that
How
exist.
many people did it take in Haiti?
What do you
Did
mean?
it take the whole island?
So, all right. The island was everyone who was enslaved, right? We talk about ideas all the time, and ideas is what animate action, but everybody that was enslaved was animated by one single idea. And that single idea that united them all was the concept of being free. And
Sure.
when they got what they thought to be freedom, right, there were those who began, because they didn't have a common socializing. There were those that betrayed the freedom of the group, right? So it's like if you don't have the ability to, and I think also it's important to recognize that, like, one thing about war, and this is why I love Sun Tzu and studying war, is that you have to assess the landscape, you have to assess the terrain. Context matters because you cannot apply the same strategy across the board, right? So, in examining the political and cultural terrain that we are faced with, you have to develop a strategy, but also you have to develop a strategy that accounts for the fact that there's competition for those minds and for those bodies. There are other people who are actively evangelizing. The LGBTQ are evangelizing. The corporations are everybody's going after that mind resource because they want that people to behave in a way that suits the interests of the people who are going after them. What I'm saying is if we recognize that our people are going in the wrong way and we're saying we're trying to create a nation or we're building institutions for those people, you have to have a communication vehicle that can penetrate them and bring them in. And they have to see value in what it is that you're doing. And the only way they're going to see the value is if you can train them and educate them to understand why this is value, right? Because you got to get people to not, you got to get them to actually go against their self interest, because you got to help them to understand that their self interest goes against our group interests and
Well,
collect.
I hear what you're saying, and I understand that there are competing hegemonic forces at play, and that's why Marcus Garvey said we are in a propaganda war, right? So I understand that. So there's nothing wrong with propagandizing yourself and pride in your race and in your culture. There's nothing wrong with that. But at the same time, you can't force anybody to do anything that they don't want to do, unless you want to be like Shaka Zulu. See, Shaka Zulu conquered many other of the Bantu groups that surrounded the Zulu to make them into the Zulus.
What does the
So
word proselytize mean?
proselytize basically means to forcibly convert or to make somebody think the same thing as someone else.
So
Or
there's no, the word force has nothing to do with proselytization. Proselytize means to convert or attempt to convert from one religion, belief, or opinion to another. So if we're saying that our people hold a set of beliefs, ideas, and opinions that are
well, I don't think it's neutral.
antagonistic to our liberation, like, if you're not attempting to convert them, which I am, I guess I'm
I want
unapologetic.
our people to return. That's what I want. I want our people to return to who we actually are. That's what I want. So I'm not trying to proselytize anybody. I'm not trying to push them into being progressive or into some kind of development strategy. I want us to return to our ancestors. I want us to regain our memories and our consciousness as African people so we can live the way our ancestors once lived.
Yeah,
So
I
I'm
think.
not trying to proselytize. I stick proselytizing goes with missionaries. It
Yeah,
goes with
I
Christians.
guess I'm an unapologetic missionary for African freedom and liberation.
Yeah,
So
I don't
think
see
I
that
that.
have
our
a
people,
question.
I can't
yeah,
force my ancestors on anyone else.
no, I'm
The
not.
proselytizers are going to force Jesus on you,
See,
or they're going to force Allah on you.
I'm not going to force, but I'm going to use intelligent effort
Influence.
and organization to influence you,
Mm.
right? That you being an African is in your best interest, right? Because there was a significant amount of effort, including physical and traumatic effort, that went into making our people into what they are today.
Yeah,
So
but
if you're
that's why I'm saying you need an institution if you want to be consistent.
yes,
Because
and
otherwise,
and
you're just
I'm
going to tap people on the shoulder, and
yeah,
then some of them
but
will
you're
stay, and some of
but
them
you,
will leave.
but you're saying like just the creation of the institution is sufficient, and I'm telling you that it's not.
No, you
The
have to maintain the
institution,
institution,
no, the
like
institution,
you maintain the church.
and the institution is maintained by the energy and the blood and sacrifice of the people, right?
Investment.
This is your primary human resource or human capital are the folks in your community. So yes, you create the
Yeah.
institution, but the institutions should have programs, aims, and objectives and ways of which to go out and bring people into that institution to transform them to go out and bring others in. Now, I think that
Right.
that's
Sure.
fundamentally where we like disagree. I think that that's what the process looks like of transforming or building a people or a
No,
nation.
you need to go
Reforming.
get new people. I'm not saying don't do that. I'm just saying, these people who be trying to proselytize and get the masses, there's not going to be any mass outbreak of any revolution. That's not a thing. That's not historically accurate. That never happened. Like,
Okay, let me jump in here. Let me jump in here because I think you both have really good points because the question that I asked, like the big question on the thumbnail is, if you build the institutions, will they come? Because at the end of the day, when it comes to our religious brothers and sisters, what we teach in the institutions are not what they want to buy,
I got
right?
you. I got to check on my daughter real quick. She just
Okay,
went
go ahead.
upstairs. Be
Go
right back.
ahead. So what happens is with the institutions, right? Like if most African center institutions, they have they have different levels, but one key element in African centered educational systems is the spirituality.
Right.
So if you have spirituality as a part of your education, you would either have to say, we're going to take this out, which that is not the African center. It's a holistic
Right.
approach. So if we take it out, then that is not an African centered educational system.
Right.
If we
how do
continue,
you do both? Yeah. How do
but
you do both at the same time?
right. So and so if we're bringing in people who are religious, then they're not necessarily going to want to go. Think about how our people act just by hearing the word African. So you can't even call it an African centered education for them to even want to be a part of
Yeah.
it.
There's no connection.
We can't even hardly have conversations with people without them using hotep as a slur. So
Right.
that's why I'm that's that's why having the conversation as in, if we build these institutions, will they actually come? Can we work together? Because I think Brother Talawa said it, and I think maybe we're all saying it, that we have to start small. Like, we have to start these things small, because if we have them, then we can have conversations about them coming. But
You
a lot
ain't got
of times
the answers.
what
You ain't got the answers.
so if we're having a conversation about the people coming, are they going to even come if they hear certain words? Because I think we all are in for African centered education, but do we
Right.
really think our Christian brothers and sisters are going to send their children to African centered institutions?
No.
The floor is Brandon.
No. No, and really, what we're really talking about, without talking about it, is there's two institutions that we mainly need to build to change the course of our community: the family institution and education. I think when it comes to business, there's a piece there too. But if we can't get the family institution correct, and we can't socialize our children to be goal directed in any direction that we want, we're going to struggle. And I think that's really what we need to talk about. So when you talk about having African centered schools and having spirituality be a part of that, that can only go so far if they're not going to be practicing at home as well. So it's a two-part institution building from my standpoint.
Yeah,
And
it's
and and
separation.
yep, and I don't think that I keep saying this, but I think there's less Christian black people that we need to worry about. We need to worry about the folks who ain't got no religious base right now. Those are the ones I think we're gonna have a better opportunity at bringing into something than the folks who are quote unquote Christians. Because if we
I
think about it, a
disagree.
lot of Christians don't use a lot of critical thinking skills either. So I mean, they're very
I
highly
mean,
emotional.
They're just
um,
already decided.
Yeah,
I,
that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
But go ahead.
I slightly, I don't think I disagree, or let me just say what in response to Brian, because I think there's a lot going on there. But I'll try to connect it to your question, Sister Mott. Will they come if you build the institutions? Yes and no. And I'll tell you a little anecdote, and then I'll get to my point. My wife had a conversation with somebody once about spirituality and religion, and she talked about she's always kind of had a very tense relationship with Christ and sanity. So in explaining that, the person said to her, she said, I'm about my ancestors and venerating them and the like. And the person said to her, what does that get you? And the what does that get you, is referring to something materialistic, right? Because we also have to talk about the materialistic values that come with Christ insanity, right? So with the institutions, I think once you're around in an institutional arrangement where that you can that feed, clothe, shelter your people, etc., their answers kind of change when those things come about. It starts to change gradually. That's why I think process is important. The challenge that we have is that African spiritual systems, because Eurasians know that it clears out our confusion, there's a lot of effort done to suppress them, and this is very clear when you look at Black majority countries. That's really, to me, I always, I think that's the quick way to answer the Christianity and Islam problem. Just look at Black majority countries. Look at Jamaica, the most churches per capita, where it's hard to get people to think systematically because they want to say crime is caused by people not going to church, right? Not the church being part of the whole European operation of funding and corruption and Afrophobia and anti-Africanism that holds back countries like Jamaica, Ghana, Nigeria, etc. So once you go there, the answer is pretty obvious. So if we build the institutions and they see that we don't need to do these things, I think most people drop their faith very quickly, because only a small number of people are that evangelical. Because once you change conditions, you see the majority generally will shift. But the other thing I want to say in terms of Christians versus people who are non-Christian, I think in the United States and in most of the African diaspora in this part of the Western world, we're we're victims of being cultural Christians. So some people may not be church going people or church invested people, but we still, and Brandon's brought this up actually himself a few times, residual Christianisms. So we have more, we get into more secular aspects of, Eurasian thinking. So I wouldn't want to say the Christian is worse than the non Christian. I think we just really have to look at Eurasianism as a whole as a problem. Just like for me, you can't just say capitalism is bad because communism is also bad, right? Look at the African situation in Cuba. It's not that pretty. I know people, that's one of the I think, yeah, I'll just leave it at that, right? Because they're both Eurasian paradigms. I think we have to really look at it in that way when it's like trying to choose between Republican and Democrat. It's just how do you want to take your punches? That's what it ultimately comes down to. So I think yes, when we're building our institutions, we just have a lot more challenges because, the war against us. And I think that shows how necessary they are. The fact that, I saw someone brought up Jamaica, the fact that you have Obia laws, right? You know, in Jamaica, why they created Obia laws was because Jamaica had the most rebellions, documented rebellions in the Western Hemisphere. It's the same way after certain rebellions in the United States. I think it's the Stonewall Rebellion, or I know Omawale or Emo can correct me, or maybe Brandon can as well. But one of the rebellions, they banned drums, African people from playing the
Stono.
drums. Stone. Oh, it is Stono. Okay, so if your enemies are
Not the
opposed
only
to you
one.
doing something, on a systematically opposed to you doing something, that's probably what you should be doing.
Mhm.
So I think now, yeah, so I think they'll definitely come. It's just we have to not just think of spirituality only in terms of rituals we do, but the economic and social and political significance of spirituality. Because sometimes what happens, there's a lot of Afro hippieism, as I call it, around, and that can sort of deter people. That's something that I think is a very very serious problem. Because people want to be I'm so spiritual and be into this race transcendent kind of crap, and that's the other side of it. So that's why I always emphasize the political significance of African spiritual systems, right? That part's important. But if you're just talking about rituals all day and exclusively rituals, then there's a problem.
And the other thing I was gonna add is the whole thing is when you're talking about spirituality, you're talking about the essential nature of what it means to be an African. So when you're in sync with your own ancestors, you know it. It's clear. That's why you dance to the music. that's 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 why you sing along. So to me it's like, when I think of organizing many African people, I think about getting many African people in harmony on the same page. That's why Marcus Garvey had marches. That's what carnival is. You see, like, but if we don't understand what our own traditions are from our own lens or our own perspective, then we think we're doing some kind of debaucherous something that Europeans do. You see, so we get confused about our own stuff because we're
Mhm.
looking at ourselves through their eyes. So that's real to me. What the most significant part of African spirituality is reconnecting with your own ancestors. We don't need Afrocentricity if we have our own connection to our own African ancestors, our own spiritual systems. You see, so people want to argue about ideologies, but my thing is, are you operating in continuity with your own ancestors the way that you could have a century ago or you could have 1,000 years ago? Consciousness doesn't actually change. Our warrior ancestors are or are the champions of our people. They have the same form in all ages.
Mhm.
You see, but people don't want to deal with history. They don't want to deal with our own ancestors. They'd rather deal with conjecture and what they're doing and being convenient.
Yeah, so I mean the because the issue is, and I know people brought it up in the chat, is one we're dealing with it's a mental issue. We're dealing with fear. So an
Yes.
example of what is the conversation we had last year, and I was thinking about the conversation because I was thinking about, and Emo, you were on that conversation. So one, I don't know if you remember what the brother said, and he was asked about building. Like he was a Christian, and so he was asked about building, with us as a community. And he said, yeah, we could build together, but I wouldn't be able to trust you with my child. I don't know if you remember that. He said, I wouldn't be able to trust you to give my child any what is it? Any advice, right? And then he ended up going down that road that, what we think is dangerous, it's a dangerous thing. So with that, that's not different than how most Christians think, because as a Christian, I thought like that. I had the auntie. I'm from Louisiana, so when I left my Christian roots, one thing that I gravitated to was Vodun, and I still am very much I'm tied to that in some way. So one thing I remember growing up as a child is seeing my auntie, my great aunt, who practiced voodoo. She was the auntie that practiced voodoo, right? So you didn't mess with her. But that's the thing, we thought of those things as demonic. So there no matter what they say, because you always go down the road, one, they think you're going to hell, right? Like that's already there. So to me, it's more of a mental issue that we're having. I think that people can come together and they can build something. So we might say, hey, let's build a grocery store in our area. I think that we can come together to build that. But I think what we're really talking about and what we really want to aim for is actually building not just institutions but community, actually building an environment where our children can grow up, and there's not just generational wealth, but actually generational land, generational
Life.
right, like a whole actual
I think that
community.
y'all think that
And
y'all have. I'm
uh,
sorry. But
uh oh, and so with that, I just think there is an issue with us being able to come together. So I think that's also where we have to decide, because even building a code, right, with our community. So how do we build a code within our community? For example, if you're a Christian and you say forgive your enemy, right? Somebody come and do something to a child in our community, and you say to forgive, and I say no, we're not forgiving that. How do we move forward? How do we build code within that? Are you saying that most people are we're just going to come together and the code is the code, and people are, I just have a hard time.
That's
And
what
that's what
happened in
sometimes
Haiti.
go ahead.
No, no, what you're describing is exactly what happened in Haiti.
Mm-hmm.
They were saying forgive the French. I
Right.
mean, this is the new colony. Deal with it. We want
Mm-hmm.
political rights inside of what exists. And other African people were like, we will have none of this. So not everybody was on the same page. I mean, that's why I said it's like when you deal with history, you're always gonna have competing interests. So you have to see which side of which war is what. So when you understand Christianity to be the European side of the war, I mean, get over. I mean, it's the truth. It's history. It's they wage holy war on you and they recruit you through the religion. They conscript you. That's literally what it is. So I mean, that's why I said it's like when you're in continuity with your own ancestors. I mean, you have your own ancestral traditions, and you have your own morality, your own rationale for why you're going to war.
Mm-hmm.
I
yeah,
mean,
I think that
May I
y'all.
touch on a point very
Mm-hmm.
briefly? I'll actually be brief. The story you brought up with the gentleman from the last conversation you had last year
Mm-hmm.
about the I wouldn't trust you with my child thing, because I watched that whole discussion. I
Mm-hmm.
watched the whole thing. Um, I think this is why it's important we define what is religion, providing a definition of what is religion and what is
Mm-hmm.
spirituality. Definition I've been told many times, and one that I agree with for religion, is that religion is the deification of a national culture, or the deification of a culture. So, for example, Islam, Arab culture is deified because the Quran is only written in Arabic, because that's God's language. Of all
yeah,
thousand language, it's
is in
God's, right?
Arabia.
Right? right? And then with Christianity, you can tell where is the exit, where are the stories centered in Eurasia, like the Middle East, Sirapal region, right? They're not centered. Yeah, Africa's mentioned marginally, but they're not centered in Africa, right?
Mm-hmm.
So these are just very basic things. So I think that's important when you think of religion in that way. I think that's what you get into then values, right? And I know you had the chart of the terms. I think axiology is values. That's an
Mm-hmm.
issue of values now, because when you get into deeper things, not just surface level things of doing good things for Black people coming together, but organizing and deep level things like how to educate your child, how you view those things. That's where you start to see it, because remember, Christianity, there's other forms of Christianity. There's no white version of voodoo. There's no Asian obia, right?
Mm-hmm.
You understand what I mean? It's something that's distinct. It's distinctively ours and distinctively tied to our particularities. So I think that definition, defining what religion is extremely important. I think that's sometimes where these conversations can get lost.
Right.
I
So,
think y'all have gotten.
okay, go ahead.
Oh yeah, I think one of the biggest issues in this conversation is it's happening too far away from the ground.
Oh,
And what I mean by that is, the first step is not, you know, building the community or building the family, right? Or, or any other these other institutions. The primary institution is the institution of self. Like
mm-hmm.
you literally have to build and reconstruct the people, right? That is the primary effort and focus if you're talking about changing the conditions, because you know it's been said a lot that thought precedes action. So
Mm-hmm.
when you're explaining the brother who you said that he thinks that this is devil worship, right? That's what you said. So
Mm-hmm.
what does that mean? It means that he has an opinion or a set of ideas that he holds on to
Mm-hmm.
about something that is dear to you. So you have a responsibility to change the mind of people who think like that. Like that's the only and the thing is I really want to focus on the question of tonight's topic. Can we build with people that don't think like us, right? Or to have the same, spiritual foundation. And it's my thing is if they don't have my foundation and I say that I can't build with them, it also means that I can't build them, right? Because like I have to have the same relationship and proximity to them to either build with them and or to build them. So if I say I can't do one, it also means that I can't do the other. There is no kind of like, y'all go your own way, y'all do what y'all want, because as we've all stated, there's competition for their mind. There's competition for their energy, right? When we think about, let me use regular examples, right? You know the way that a new corporation is like after it's formed, how it's capitalized. Do you know how you know that what that process is?
Oh, you asking me?
I'm asking anybody on the panel the way that a new corporation is capitalized after it's formed, because it's like you have the idea. You say, I'm gonna
Mm-hmm.
go and form this institution based on this idea.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I've now formed the institution. I have the certificate. The institution exists.
Mm-hmm.
The institution cannot carry out its mission without resources. So
Yeah.
they need to be capitalized. And we always say that there's two types of power, two types of political powers: organized people or organized money,
Yeah.
right? So the way that a corporation goes about it is they do what's referred to as an initial public offering.
Yeah.
They say to the public, like, hey, you can buy in to our mission, and this is how much it'll cost you. And
Mm-hmm.
those who believe or those who've been persuaded hand over resources, and then those resources are used to advance the mission of the corporation. It's the same thing with our institutions that we develop for liberation. We have to say to the people that we need their resource, whether it be their talent, their time, their treasure, their bodies. That's what's going to capitalize us. That human capital, that's what's going to power us. But if you can't reach them, if you say, well, they don't think like I think, so, and I'm into just letting them go their own way, it's like, no, you actually have to have a plan in place to go after that human resource so that you can capitalize your institution so that your institution can actually carry out its mission. So if you
Mhm.
can't change their mind, if you can't change your opinion, you then have to ask yourself, what is it that you're trying to build? And are you serious about building it? If you saying I'm not willing to use those materials right there because those materials, haven't been treated or don't meet the specifications of what I'm trying to build. Like that's not where I'm at with it. I just see things a little
So
differently.
I do I get what you're saying, because I do believe that we should use whatever we're gifted in, and we use it for to the betterment of our people. But aren't we taking, most of us most of us are taking our strengths, our gifts, and we're taking them to other communities. So I think that it's it's so many different layers to this conversation, because I know that there are people who may be Christian, and they may do still want to work with building within the Black community, but I think that it always has a kind of an integrationist tone to it, as opposed to a nation building tone. Um,
It's about influencing them. Like Reverend Albert B. Clee. He's a Christian Black nationalist, right? So there are lots of things. That's the guy who Malcolm X gave his speech, his final speech, and at the beginning he says Reverend Clee. He's talking about Reverend Albert B. Clee out of Detroit. The Church of the Black Madonna has his
mhm,
whole form of like. So there are people who hold bad. I mean, Garvey was a Roman Catholic, although he said there are many, religions,
right.
because he said, like if you read philosophies and opinions, he says that each individual person has their own religion. But the problem, the point I'm making is that he still built, and he wasn't building in an integrationist way.
Mhm,
So we can't flatten things out. We have
mhm,
to work with who we can work with. And
okay,
there's certain people who think like I think and may, practice African spirituality, but they'll be no good in terms of working with them. Right?
mhm,
They don't know how to work, they don't know how to build. It's just basic intangibles, basic decency. You
mhm,
can't build with people if you're disrespecting them. That's why I'm
yeah,
always like I'm critical of Christianity, but I'm
mhm,
also mindful just how to maintain good relationships with family. So
mhm,
if I know that that's a sticking point, I'm not going to attack them on it, right? Because I know that I need them as a resource in order to do what I'm trying to do. So I think that's the difference here. Like when you get
Well,
to the ground and put your finger in the mud, it's just a different way of moving.
Well, I don't think it's an issue of being on the ground or being off the ground. I think, Omawale, with respect, I think you're framing it as people who think like me or think like me versus opinions when it's an issue of values. So, for example, let's go to Garvey, right? Garvey, obviously, we know he was a Christian, but the UNA talked about civilizing the backward tribes of Africa. So, what we can say is I don't think being a Christian or being Islamic that we're morally condemning people or saying you're a sellout by default. But even those are champions, right? Like Marcus Garvey and others. We can see that in cases like those, there's limitations, right? Like there's certain limitations to Marcus Garvey. Like I think Marcus Garvey is right that nation building should be our political objective.
So can I ask you
But
one
would I?
question?
But let me finish though. Would I go to him for aesthetics? With clothes, not necessarily. But
Can I
he's
ask you one
absolutely
question?
right. No, not yet. I'm not finished yet. Right. I think we can acknowledge limitations of people who are, and you can see how Christianity manufactures and comes out in some of his limitations. I think that's okay to say, but I'm not gonna condemn him because he's Christian. But when we get into values and the systematic effects that Christianity has, we have to be honest about that. So when it comes to, and I agree with you when you say, what do you plan on building? I do think that's ultimately what it comes down to. And when we're thinking in a Pan-Africanist context, you cannot build with something that it's not grounded in the sacredness of African people. At the
Yeah,
end of the
no
day, that's
prosperity.
why I say it's very important that you look at Black majority countries. That pretty much answers the question: what Christianity and Islam do. It shows you what the end game ultimately is. It's constant confusion, and we're all dealing with confusion in varying degrees and forms. I think that honesty is required. We have to be honest. I have to be honest about my own confusion, right? So I'm more interested in direction. So I understand de-whitenization, re-Africanization as a process. And because I always like to explain to people the difference between someone who's Afrocentric versus someone who's not is not how much I know versus how much you or they know. I think that's the wrong way to go about it. It's if we all can agree that, we have this problem, it's how do you understand the problem and how are we trying to navigate this problem? So how do you see de-whitenization, re-Africanization as the problem? Then we can work and we're going to iron out those kinks intergenerationally. Like I see a great example of this with the Kambon family, right? You have Baba Kamal Kambon doing what he did, Black Center Psychology. Then you see Obenfo Badle Kambon, the things he does, having, a Pan-African, social media where you don't have to worry about certain interference. I'll just say it on the BB to me, right? You see that was something that started off small and became big, right? But you see the intergenerational thing being there. You see this with Afrocentricity International, very small organization, started out in 2011 with chapters everywhere. In Ivory Coast, you're actually having the African Renaissance Temple being built, where African people can venerate our ancestors. But it's not just for veneration; it's also economic and social things. You have the institution building being there, and people are starting to flock to that institution because there's certain conditions affected. So I think that it's not simply about initial opinions or do you agree with me tit for tat. I think it's about orientation and direction. And we've gotten to a point, unlike the time of, when, Garvey and Malcolm X's, where we're at a point where our systematic understanding of religion might be a bit better now than it was then, or maybe clearer now than it was then. Kind of like with Marxism. At one point, I always tell people, I
Go.
always say, before, really after Marimba Ani's text, Urugu, you don't need to be a Marxist after that point. Anything before that work, there's no need to be a Marxist, right? I think it's just one of those things. And that's why I think the concept, and let's give an African concept here, the concept of Kepler, transformation for a loose translation, is important, right? Of growth and transformation. I don't think we should be stuck in one stage. We grow through process. So I don't think, liberation is going to happen like that. I think there's going to be certain things in process. That's why I think the intergenerational point I brought up earlier is really important. And it's going to require a lot of our patience to start small. And that's going to involve, to Omawale's point, where I do agree with him, you're going to bite some bullets, but biting the bullets shouldn't be the end game. That's just something that you're going to have to deal with, but you should be in position to shed those at some point. You just have to tolerate them situationally. So I think there's a difference between situational things and then transitional things. But I think those are things you can't really theorize. I think they're just things that just happen. I know I said a lot.
A lot. You just gave us like an 8-minute dissertation right there, all to say not much. Like at the end of the
But
day,
you clearly want to organize with Christians and Muslims.
yes,
Say not much.
yes, I do. I want to influence my people, right? So this is what it comes down
Well,
to.
keep saying
Hold
But
that.
on,
you can't
hold
you
on,
can't say I said not much. You
hold on.
disagree with me, but you can't say I said
I
nothing.
just allowed you to speak for 8 minutes straight. I allowed young Tupac to even like, now let me get my thought out. All right, and then y'all both can respond. All right. So at the end of the day, this is what it comes down to, and it's very simple. You can have the absolute correct analysis. You can understand what all the limitations are that Marcus Garvey has, and you should, right? Because you had a chance to live in a time that he hasn't lived in. So you've had a chance to learn from his mistakes and the information that's come after him. But this is the fact that you can't get around. With his limitations, you cannot influence him to correct them or to move in a different direction if you don't have a relationship with him. And he's going to have a better relationship with somebody who's working in the trenches beside him. You can be the man that walks up to a man while he's working and start talking to him, or you can be the man that walks up to a man while he's working and start working with him, right? The person who's working with that person is going to have a much stronger relationship and is actually going to have currency that they can spend to transform the consciousness and the minds of their people. And that's based on action. It's not based upon the fact that my analysis is correct. Because I can know that my people have an incorrect analysis. But if I'm saying, well, that means I can't work with them because they ain't got the correct analysis, it's like, where can I work with them? And how can I strategize to influence them? That's what we're missing, and that's what we're getting around.
Well, we're
And
missing it because we're not
Well,
and
Protestants.
that's
it's
and
not that
that's
we're missing it. You
and
just
that's
missed the point of what I said. You just
and
missed
that's and that
entirely the point of what I said.
and that is the difference between developing a maroon enclave versus maturing to an actual nation. A maroon enclave can exist beside the plantation, but the plantation is systemically institutionalized. So it's going to carry on where that enclave is going to pass away if it don't have more people coming into it that can form it into an actual nation. So this is intelligent thought and design, and a lot of folks who you need to be building don't think like you think. And you have to figure out, is this somebody I can work with? Like, do they give me anything that I can use? And then working with them, can I influence them? But if I ain't working with them, I really can't influence them. And that's really what it comes down to.
Okay, so you missed the entire point of
Good
what I
point.
said because you're deviating. You're actually making a straw man. Again, this is a
You
straw
said
man
Garvey
argument.
had limitations, and my
No, hold on.
response
Let
to
me
you,
finish. You're
no,
saying
no,
you
my
said 8 minutes
question,
of nothing, and
my
then you brought
question,
back. No,
because
no,
you
no, no, no,
did,
no. Let me
I
finish.
had a
You're
simple
no, no,
question
no, no, no.
at
What
the
I'm
beginning.
saying, you're straw
You
manning.
said
Here's where
Garvey
I'm
had
saying you're straw
limitations,
manning.
so you can't work with him.
Here's where
Did
you're
you not
straw
say
manning
that?
me.
Did
Here's
you
where
not
you're
say?
straw manning.
Did you not
Here's
say
where I'm
Garvey
gonna
had
Wait,
explain.
wait,
Hold
limitations?
on.
wait,
I'm gonna
wait,
explain,
wait.
brother. I'm gonna
No, because you
explain
said I'm
where
straw
you're
manning.
straw manning. I'm gonna
Did you
tell you where
not
you're
say?
straw manning.
Did you
I'm
not
gonna
say
tell
that
you.
Garvey
Hold
has
on, man. You can't let me
limitations?
explain how I'm
No,
gonna explain
no,
your
because
man
there's no
straw
straw
manning
man.
me. No,
There's
no,
no
no.
straw
Because
man.
no, no.
If
I'm
you
gonna
if
explain how
if
you're
you
straw manning.
if you said, if it came out of your
I'm
mouth
gonna
that Garvey had limitations,
explain. I'm
then
gonna
you ended.
explain, man. You,
You
you
know this
can't
is
just let me. You
recorded.
can't ease up, no.
This is
You
this
can't
is
just
a
let me explain the thing. I'm gonna
no.
explain.
I'm
Oh,
not.
Wallet. I'm gonna
But I'm not.
explain what the straw man
I don't
is.
need your
I,
explanation because I
no,
responded
no,
to
you
this.
do.
I
You
responded to
do
you
need the
saying
explanation because
Garvey has limitations,
I'm
so you
not.
can't work with him.
I'm not. You're
That is
not. That's
recorded.
not what I said. That's not what I
Okay,
said. That is not what I
let's
said.
run back the tape. You
That's
started
not
by
what I
saying
said.
he had
That's
limitations,
not
and at
what I
the end of your
said.
Yo,
soliloquy,
Taloa,
you said
let him
you,
finish, and
you
then
No,
you
said
no, no.
go.
I'm not letting him finish
you,
because no. Because
it,
he keeps making this straw man argument, and
there's
Okay,
no,
no
no.
fam,
And I
straw
love
listen
him,
man
Wallet,
here.
here.
but this is a
Okay,
straw
okay.
man argument that
There's
he
no
does.
straw
I'm
man.
gonna have to put
Everybody,
You
time out.
I'm gonna have to put everybody on mute. Okay. All right. So, Brother Wale, go ahead and then tell why is that okay? Can he finish and then can you go in?
He started by saying
I will say no.
Harvey has
I don't accept that.
limitations, and he ended his statement and saying, and therefore I cannot work with you. Go back and listen to all 12 minutes of what he spoke. My point was responding to that. Yes, let's say Garvey has limitations. Let's say that your analysis is 100% spot on. You cannot influence Garvey to correct his limitations if you don't have a relationship with him. And you have a better relationship with him if you're actually assisting him or working side by side. There's nothing straw man about that. That's a direct response to what you said. And we
Well,
can literally run back
he
the
made a
tape.
different argument.
Okay.
No.
Go ahead.
That's a misrepresentation of my argument completely. What
All
I'm
right.
saying is, because Garvey, because I love Garvey. Everyone on this panel knows that and knows me. I agree. Marcus Garvey, I think, outlined what our political objective should be. He's correct. But when we talk about the UNIA saying civilizing the backwards tribes of Africa, obviously that's a limitation we can see that comes from Christianity.
Clearly.
That's the short, long. That's clear. So I don't think being Christian means necessarily that because of our confusion, the nuances in our confusion. I don't think because someone is Christianity or Islam that they're necessarily anti-nationalist per se. I think there's nuances there, with certain situations in the cases of a Garvey or a Malcolm. But generally, we know with Islam and Christianity, a lot of integrationist sentiments come out, generally speaking. But obviously, there's exceptions. So that's not what I was saying. What is your straw man that you bring up in this conversation with religion is that we just kind of have this pious approach and we just shut down people for being Christian or Islamic. when it's been brought up, or at least alluded to, if not explicitly said, that there's an issue of value systems. Like an anecdote Ma brought up that I thought was important is when the gentleman says, I can't have, you educate my child. I don't need to convince that person, right? Because they've already made their social and political decision at that point. That's not an issue of me being biased. That's just they've made their choice. And I think that's just a lot of it. And I've brought up several examples, or I brought up two examples of, I think our issue is going to be intergenerational. We have to think intergenerationally, and we have to build small and slowly. If you disagree with that, then you disagree with that. But bringing it every time to, oh, well, you can't have a conversation with a certain person, and Joe, you can't relate to him. I don't think we have a problem with relating to people. I think that's false. I think if anyone's been compromising, it's over us. And that gets to how this problem of, religion is a block. It's a building block. It's a building limitation. It limits what we can build. When you ask, can you build with people in spiritualism? This whole conversation shows why it's limited, because when you say that, we're immediately told that we're the problem. When yet you can show systematically, it's not just a historical point, it's a systematic thing. There's a reason why Eurasians are comfortable with us in these systems, and these are vectors of compromise. Religion is a vector of compromise.
So, I think Brandon, did you want to jump in? Okay, okay. So,
let them rock.
Because you're wrong.
So, Brother Omwale, I wanted to ask you, because someone had mentioned it in the chat. So, are you saying that you want to win them over before building, or are you saying these things have to happen simultaneously
While building.
while building?
Yeah, you work with the willing. You work with what resources you have at your disposal, right?
The only question I'd ask is building what?
If I'm the leader, then I have it's my strategy, right? You ever been on the road and you ever heard the concept of you have to drive for other people? There's a bunch of people on the road, and the reason why I'm bringing this up, because earlier in the conversation you mentioned about people being dangerous, right? Like I keep if you understand the limitations that people have, then you know where, when, and how you can use them. Right? That's what it comes to about being a strategist. And at the end of the day, 99.9% of African people are dominated, subjugated, and dislocated. So if you think that you're gonna okay, well, this point one over here, we got the right answer. And we ain't gonna figure out no type of strategy to convince that other, even a portion of them to, like, there's ways that some people you're going to win them over with reason and logic. Some people you might have to win over with force, like whatever is required to achieve the goal, right? So I guess that gets down to by any means necessary. And there's I'm gonna state this and make it very clear. One of the reasons why I move the way that I move, because in certain circles there's a level of like elitism and a bit of like just out of touchness, right? I come from Philadelphia, PA 19133. I've learned a lot, I've developed a lot, but I'm intelligent enough to use strategy, and I know my people enough to understand what moves them. So if my goal is to indeed move them or influence them, I'm never going to put myself in a space where I'm like, well, I'm above them because they don't know what I know or because they have limitations. What I know, plus what's in me, what's in my heart, is going to make me get beside them and work to build based upon my vision, and me articulating my vision to them. I'll get the support of what I get. Some of the people who want to support might be Christian. Some of the people who want to support might be Muslim. Some of the people who want to support might be atheists, right? But I can use the pieces on the board based upon how they make themselves available to me. I think that that's what any wise general would do. No wise general would say, I'm going to sit over here and create this lighthouse and then not turn the light on so the ships can come, off the ocean. That's just my perspective. And I'm okay with having a differing perspective.
Yeah, but I don't think anyone's. I think that's mischaracterizing the points made thus far. That's why I say it's a straw man, because that's not. No one is saying, "Well, I know more than you, and they don't know nothing, so let's forget about them." No one said that. Even what you said that I said about Garvey, that was inaccurate. That's not what I
I
said.
mean, we can literally go back and play the clip back.
Yeah, and you did wrong because that's not what I said. I
Right.
talk about Garvey all the
Matter of
time.
fact,
You did
I
wrong.
will. I will. I'll go back. I'll go back and get the clip, and I'll put out both
Unless
points,
there's maybe some. The only thing
which I
is,
was responding to. I was
yeah,
responding to
because no,
one,
I would.
the assertion that there being a limitation. So my first response was, okay, let's agree that there's a limitation because based on our analysis, we know that there is. How do you correct that limitation without relationship? And then you end it by saying, and that's why I can't work with a person like that. That is what you said,
Unless
right?
something cut out on
That,
your
that,
end, that's the
I
that,
only
mean,
thing that could happen.
I
Because
mean,
I would never
let me,
say throw away Marcus Garvey because he's
all right.
Christian. I would say there's limitation. That doesn't make sense with anything. That just doesn't make any. That's why I said there may
well, let
be.
me ask a new question. Let me ask a new question. Is there any reason that some of the marooned Africans who lived in free African societies decided that some runaway enslaved Africans couldn't live with them, and they decided to sell them back or give them back to plantation owners? Is it, you think there's a reason for that?
Your question sounds
Absolutely.
rhetorical, so speak to whatever reason it is that you're trying to say.
What I'm saying is, when you have a free African society, do you think just any old African person can be a part of your free African society and keep it intact?
So how does that relate to the how does that relate to the Maroon enclaves? Because Maroon enclaves, they sent people back for many reasons.
Yeah.
Some of them entered into treaties with the enemy. Some of them actually occupied the role of catchers and bringing people back. So it's like, what point are you trying to make here?
The
Because
point, the point
that
I'm
was
trying to,
a survival enclave that definitely never made it to the formation of nation. Survival enclaves can exist side by side the plantation.
okay, yeah, there you go. So that's what I was getting to. So the whole point I was getting to is, can two nations occupy the same space at the same time?
That wasn't a nation. That's the point that I'm trying to make.
Okay, then.
I
So they
would. I
weren't
would
a nation.
disagree. I would disagree with that.
But the way Haiti became a nation is they removed the European nation from the space that they were trying to occupy. So that's the point about Christianity and this idea of it being neutral. You see, like the thing is, if you don't understand that it's still a part of their Euro-Christian slavery system of our people, then you're making compromises with it
There's no
because
compromise. No argument has been made that Christianity is neutral. I said that folks who believe in Christianity, I think that that's a wrong idea, which means that I have to either convert them to believing a new idea, right, or influence them to think or behave in a certain way.
which that sounds
How is that
practical. But
neutral?
what you know of
So
Christians,
now what we have in a discussion is about the tactics of influencing them to think in a different way. I've never said it was neutral, right? But you asked me, could I work with them while they believe what they believe? And the reality is, like 99% of our community is holding some thoughts that are antagonistic to African liberation. I understand that, right? And me understanding that and me being clear means that I got to figure out a way to influence them to think something different. So I have to show them something different. And the best way to show is through your actions. I ain't just gonna pop up on you like, yo, this is the analysis and these are the
agreed, you do have
limitations.
to show something different. But I think that's a condescending argument to say that people who practice African
Nah, it's nothing.
spirituality
It's
aren't
nothing.
doing what Garvey's doing.
It's nothing.
That's what it sounds like
It's
you're saying.
no. What I've said, and I don't have to apologize for saying what I said.
Yeah, go
That
ahead.
there is none of us, right, who've corrected the limitations or who practice African spirituality who've been able to build what Garvey has built. Shit, there's nobody in the so-called, in this community today
But
who's
why
even been
didn't
able.
what Garvey
Hold on,
built stay?
because of its limitations.
It
That's why.
can't
And
coexist.
there's none of us. There's none of us like
Repression.
there's yes, it's a war.
Yeah.
Like so, there's going to be a counter movement. That's what chess is. You move, they move. Like that's what happens here. But the point I'm making is that even Tariq Nasheed, Like, there's none of us in this community who could say we've been able to build what he's built. Like, so it's like, if we serious
What did
and
he
we
build?
got the correct analysis and we understand the limitations, then we got to show and prove. That's the
Well,
point that's the
I
point
would
I'm making.
I would say we are doing that. I would disagree and say we are doing that. That's false. Actually, I think it's a straw man
I'm not
again.
talking about potential. I'm talking
I
about
didn't say potential. No,
I'm
no, no,
talking
no, no,
about
no. I didn't say potential.
I'm talking
I,
about what's been realized. Point me
because
to something that has been
okay, I'm gonna
realized
point.
or
I'm gonna point it.
not
I'm gonna
something
point.
that's
Hold on, hold
being
on,
built,
hold
but
on,
something
hold
that's
on, hold
been
on. No,
realized.
no, because no, we have to talk about that because things don't just come up so like that. So I have to. We have to talk about that,
I
sir.
want to,
Sir,
if
Omo,
you want
brother,
to
we
point
gotta
on,
talk
if
about
you
it.
want to see,
I'm going. I'm getting to it.
in,
I'm getting
in,
to
in,
it. I'll
in
be
the
quicker than
business,
normal. I'll get
in the
into it
business
because you're
world,
strong. Because
in the
see, no,
business
because yeah,
world,
but we're
we have
talking
the
about African
concept,
liberation,
and
not
in the
the
business,
capitalist
no,
corporation
no, no,
world.
no.
So
See,
let's get into it because this is the point. This is the point.
intelligent people can use any analogy. In the business world,
But
there's a
no
concept
one.
called work in progress. There's a concept called a finished good. A finished good can be sold to people. Work in progress is still being progressed into a finished good, so it can be
But
sold. So don't talk to me about the work that's in progress. Point me to the finished goods. That's what I'm saying. What has been realized? Because
Sankofa.
I can look at Tariq and know that his analysis is fucked up and understand his limitations and understand where what he's doing is taking us in the wrong. I can understand all of that. But you know what? I can't compare what I've realized to what he's realized and say that I've done more or been more effective than him
You
because I
shouldn't compete
see,
haven't.
with Drake
okay,
and
this
So
is
shit.
where
this
values
is where
become important because what Tariq's done is ain't shit.
no,
Because you know what? We're
this is
still
where
dealing
this
with
is
this
where
problem. So
this
what
is
has
where
he done?
this is where
What has
okay.
Tariq Nasheed
So
done?
We
That's
can
where
answer
we
that.
disagree because
okay,
this is
let's
where
do a
we get into
comparison.
values and what we've
He's
done.
he's
What
he's
has Tariq
managed to
done?
get black people in this
You
country to
shouldn't
give him
compete
more.
with Tariq Nasheed.
He's managed to get black people in this country to give him more than $1 million for an institution. What
Yeah.
could we, knowing the limitations and have the right analysis, what could we do with that level of resources?
What is
But
this institution that he's building that's
I'm
so great?
asking
but
you,
even
But what's the instant? What is he building?
you
This gets to a
okay.
question we both
Let's
agree on.
so
What is he
let's
building? Because
so
Mentor Tariq Nasheed is building something. So what is he building that's so
let's talk about
great?
something that you and I are very familiar with.
He's
You talked
popular.
you talked about the temple that's being built in the Ivory Coast. I led the fundraising efforts for that for a number of years. The temple has
Yes.
not, it's still a vision and it's still a work in progress and resources are still needed. So what I'm saying is what would we have been able to do with that $1 million? So what are our tactics going to be to influence the behavior of our people? Because he
yeah,
was able, through the art of persuasion, through the art of communication, to influence our people to think in a certain way. And you can have the right message, right?
right.
But if your messaging is ineffective, it doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter.
I
That's
Right.
the
disagree
point.
with you
But he's
because you have to get
repeating.
into what institution did
He's
Tariq build?
So
What
repeating.
is he
He's
so
building
repeating
to begin
the
with?
ideology that
Because
the
this is
white
what it
people
gets
did.
because it gets into what are you trying to build? Tariq ain't build shit. That's the
so he,
reality of it. That's why Tariq Nasheed ain't build shit.
right, but he has
That's
a
constructive.
but he has a lot more influence than everybody on this live right now because he was
Yeah,
able
he
to
has
put
influence saying the same
but
thing that
but
he
it
was told to
What
works.
he's
say.
done is
And he's pulled
created
people
diversion.
he's pulled more black folks closer to the conscious community than any of us on this call
What is the
by
conscious
creating
community?
man,
I
Yeah.
think
you know
there's
what
I
the
think
conscious
you know
community is
what I
talking
think
No,
it
about.
I don't.
is.
I
I
think
think what it is.
we can get
I'll
into
slow up.
nuances, but I'll tell you what.
I
Right
think the
now,
question is
I'm
though, what are
raising
you
I'm
trying to
raising
build?
funds. I'm raising funds right now for a documentary project, which is the first leg, um, and a long term plan that addresses limitations and is really working towards liberation. I only need 70K to get this project done. So far, I've been able to raise 7K. So for me, it's in my interest to examine, okay, what about my messaging is ineffective? Because I know my analysis is right, but my analysis is not penetrating the minds of the people or getting them to act in a desired way. So I have to ask myself, well, then how do I reach them? Like, this is where strategy and where tactics come in. You understand what I'm saying? So I know for sure I ain't going to reach them through condemnation. I'm not going to reach them. The Christians, yeah, they think wrong. So I ain't going to be like, you backwards ass Christian, and then they see me as their brother. It's like, no, I'm gonna be working beside them. Like,
But
yo, man, like this shit out here. I'm gonna give them the history. I'm gonna give them the context. And as I get closer to them, as I establish trust and connection, then I have an opportunity to uh, uh, um, to lower their defenses and to give them information that can bring them closer, that can decrease the gap between them and me. But I can't do that. Condemnation is not a tactic that's going to win in that regard. That's
Yeah,
what
but it's a straw man because no
I
one was
think.
condemning.
Hold on.
We're analyzing Christianity and Islam as values. This is
I think what
specifically why I
I'm
said
not
hold up
talking
emo for a
about
second.
this.
But this is why. But this
But
is why because that's not what we said. Because you
Follow. Let
keep
me
talking
go
about
real quick.
this condemning. Nobody is doing nothing like that. That's why I said your argument makes no sense. And yes, you do have to talk about what's in progress because things don't just come out of smoke, right? So what Tariq Nasheed has built is nothing. That's why you have this whole FBA stupidness. He's built nothing. So it's a stupid example, right?
the
You say
point that
what
I
he's built,
was
he built
making
nothing.
is that we
Now,
can't
when we
think
look at, and
that
I
there's
pointed
no
to
one
another
who holds the
example,
beliefs
look
that
at
we
Cambon in
believe.
Ghana. They're building a
There-
whole
there-
institution, right? Where
there's
people are, so
there-
there's things going on. So when you're
Listen,
saying
I've
we're not
been on
about
a
a
BB
program,
to me, and a BB to me is consistently attempting to raise funds so that
Funds.
it can actually create what it wants to create. It's still in progress, and
of
I'm
course.
not knocking that at all. But the point that I'm raising is that a BB to me is not the Negro world. That was an
Right.
institution created by the UNIA. A BB to me is not the African Dolls Factory. That was an institution created by the UNIA. The
No,
UNIA
yes.
had a requirement in their constitution that every chapter had to own a physical building in order to meet. They had more than 300 chapters in the United States. So what I'm telling you is if we are assessing, right, what we have done, those of us who understand the limitations and those of us who have the right perspective, and we comparing it against folks who didn't understand their limitations, i.e., Garvey, and didn't have the right perspective, we can't even fucking touch their ankles.
Well,
Well,
first of all, I never
let me
said
go.
Garvey had the wrong perspective. I
You
never
said,
said
yeah,
I say he had
I'm talking
limitations, but
the
I'm not saying
limitations.
he's whole. It's not a whole wrong and a whole right
The
thing. I
point I'm
think there's a
making is that
misframing.
those of us who know much, because we're living in a time after Garvey, we had the chance to learn from his mistakes and we had a chance to attain additional information. Those of us who have acquired that mindset, have we been able to accomplish what he accomplished with his limitations?
I think you're talking about
Okay,
mass
well,
notoriety.
I ain't
You're
talking about
not
mass
talking about build. Yes,
notoriety.
you are because
I'm talking
that's the
about
whole thing. You're talking,
factories. I'm talking about buildings. I'm talking about institutions. I'm talking about
but
newspapers. I'm talking about economies. Those are
Economies don't
material
but these are
accomplishments
things
that
we
I'm.
are doing. But those are
You're
things are being.
saying
But
that
you're
we
saying you
are
don't want
doing.
to see
Where
what's
are they? I'm looking
they
around.
are there.
I'm in
You
this
go.
generation like you are. I don't see them, fam. I don't see no
Well,
Negro
they
Dolls
are.
factory.
But you said works in progress don't count. But are they just going to
No,
come out of nowhere?
I'm saying
Because
that
you
at,
and IA took
at,
time.
at
At
one
one point
time,
was a
at
work
one
in
time, the
progress. What's
Negro
your point?
Dolls factory was a work in progress, but it ended up being a finished good. Where are our finished goods?
But
And
I
y'all keep
also
trying to slide around that to talk about.
I'm
It's
not
no.
like,
sliding
Hold,
it
no,
around.
hold,
It's
hold on,
just
hold
you're
on.
working from a
Let
Eurocentric
me
linear
hold on, follow.
perspective.
Let me
That's
go.
what it is,
no,
and
Let me
that's
finish.
why value system is
Okay,
important.
okay, all
we're
right.
talking about potential here, and I'm having a conversation about what we've realized. It's like I talk about like war, but I understand we ain't nowhere near war ready, right? That's a work in progress. I understand that we ain't nowhere near war ready. Like, I understand that we can't handle the logistics of war. We can't even build our own weaponry. Shit, all they got to do is cut us off from Rite Aid, and half of us will die because we can't get our insulin shot. So, like, I'm talking about real shit. Pardon the language, my aunt, because I don't think you allow cursing on your
Yeah,
show.
you
So,
good.
pardon me
You
for that.
good.
But I'm talking about real things. Like, what have we realized? Not what's in the process. Not we got this idea to create a temple based upon these values, because that's a great idea. How do we achieve it? And the reality is, I tell you what, I know as a person who's led the fundraising for that effort, I wasn't only fundraising from people who think like me. I was going to every Tom, Dick, and Harry black person in the community, like, yo, we trying to create this. And some of them they gave just because they chose to give or whatever. But I didn't say, no, I'm not going to ask you for no money because you don't think like me.
I think
I'm
But
just
no
saying,
one's making
that's
that
unfortunate.
argument, though. That's why I'm saying it's a
what
straw
I'm
man. No
saying is,
one's made
we're
an
saying,
argument like that.
What's the
That's what I'm
question?
saying. No
What's
one
the
is
question?
saying that, Omar. You're arguing a
All right,
straw
Listen,
man.
what's the question
listen.
on your
Yo,
panel?
you both y'all been arguing for 10 minutes. Let me say something.
I'm about to log off. I just want to know what's the question on the panel. Was the question, can we build with people who think like us?
Yeah, so if we build it, will they come? So that was the basis of the conversation, building with can we build? But I think what we're seeing here, right? Like we have this division even within the Pan-African community. So I mean, it's hard for someone to come in, to this if we can't even, because the thing is what are we building, right? Like what are we doing? Because I think there's two different directions that we're coming, because I think some people do want to take that direction of notoriety, and some people are saying that we can go small. We don't have to have the masses come in, because if we build, if I start a school, let's say I just started a school, and I started that one school, and then I that school ended up being all over the country. So I think that we're missing each other on the fact of we want masses of people,
I think.
I
but
don't know. We
some of
don't even
us,
need masses.
Can I say
Show
right?
me,
something?
show me. I'm tell you what. I'm in Philly,
Let me.
Uh-huh.
really conscious city, predominantly, black city. Just show me the institutions of right thinking African people who
Mm-hmm.
have the correct analysis, who understand the limitations. Like, show me where they are.
Mm-hmm.
I'll show you.
Point to one in Philly, because the Maleficate Asante Institute ain't one. So somebody
Yeah,
please point to one.
The Charles O. Blockson collection.
Oh, you mean this housed in Temple University? So that's ours, huh?
It is Dr. Blockson's, yes.
Okay, so it's housed in Temple University.
Yeah, he made an arrangement with Temple University so that they
Okay.
could resource it, so people in
Okay.
North Philly could have access to it.
That's definitely not an example. That's
Why
definitely not
not?
an example.
So Omar,
Why
tell me
not?
what does it look like? Just
Because I know it
so
is.
if it was the perfect
I'm willing to. What I'm telling you is, I'm even willing to take what you're talking about. You said a small school.
Mhm.
I'm willing to
No,
take
I
that.
said a library.
No. I'm talking to my aunt. She said we don't need notoriety. Why can't we just create a small school and then replicate it? And I'm like, you know what? I agree with that. Now show me the small school that exists.
Well, aren't there small African-centered schools?
Come on, man.
Yes, there are
Oh,
institutions.
wait,
There
wait,
are
wait,
I
wait,
will.
institutions
I
there.
will
Omar
say.
is just straw
I
manning the
will.
No.
conversation.
There's no
He's straw
institutions
manning
here.
the conversation. He's
There's
straw manning the conversation.
African
Let me
centered
but he's
charter
straw
schools.
manning.
Hold
He's
on.
straw manning the
Hold on.
conversation.
I don't want us to fight, though. I don't want us to
We're
No,
not
fight.
fighting. I'm
I
just
don't
saying
want to
he's
fight either.
manning.
Can I make my point? I never got to make
There's
my point.
African centered charter schools in the city of Philadelphia. My nephew graduated from one, Imhotep. Now let me go to that school, right? Because we want to measure effectiveness.
Mhm.
Let me find one product that's came out of that institution that is in fact African centered, right? I'll give you one. I'll give you an example of one. That's one that's working. There's something called the Akobin House in Atlanta by Baba Baruti and Mama Baruti. I would point to that as an example, right?
Homeschooling collective.
Hold,
Yes.
hold on one second. But we're talking about, I would also look at that as a maroon enclave. And
Yeah,
the
they
point
moving
that
like a BB to me.
hold on one second. The point that I raised is that maroon enclaves, if we're talking about nations, right? Nations are institutions. There's a network of institutions,
But
and
the
they
Moon
and they socialize and create people to manage and maintain those institutions. We're not at that level.
or you're
It's
not part of the effort.
okay. Now that's a joke, but I'm
Well, I'm
a
not saying you. I'm saying everybody's not part of the effort.
yeah. This is an interesting situation. I don't understand. Like, we can get into it's very interesting because, like, what I'm putting forth right here, I don't even understand why there's even disagreement. I'm literally saying that those of us who understand the limitations and have the correct analysis, we haven't been able to create or establish at the level of folks in our community now or that came before us who had limitations and had the incorrect analysis. Is that not a factual statement? I'm getting responses like, well, we are building. We have building in process. That's not what I'm talking about. So
No one's saying
why is
that.
there even a disagreement with that? That's a factual statement. So it's like,
I
can we not, are we delusional or we just don't want to embrace the reality?
No,
What's a
I
factual
don't think.
statement?
I think we're all talking about
Well, hold on. Let me
institution
get my
building.
point
I
out
just think you
first.
have a
Before you do
Eurocentric
this,
perspective
let me
on
say
it
my point.
because you haven't even because when you said
The
and
whole
what
point I was
revealed
gonna
it is when
say,
you said Tariq Nasheed
follower,
was
come on,
building,
dog.
right? That gets to the point, right? Like that's nothing. He did nothing of value,
Well, let me make
right?
a
That
point. So
tells
the
me,
point
and
I
this
was
is why
gonna
we have
say
to
is
talk
if we're
about
focused,
values.
yo,
And
if we're
we're
focused, come on, dog.
sorry, Emo, but he's wrong.
So if you're focused on institutions, then I'd say we should focus on posterity because that should be the focus. If we're talking about African institutions, we should be talking about what lasts. You see, what continues for eternity, what continues to be a touch point that our people can continue to be influenced over many generations. So
Yeah.
that's why I used the Blockson, but I was also going to use maybe even the Schomburg, those or a museum, or
Bro,
maybe
bro,
even
bro, please don't do that, man. Like we should actually be ashamed that Bloxon and Arthur
no, you
Schomburg
didn't let me
have
finish.
to have their
You didn't let me
collections
finish.
housed in these institutions. We should be ashamed
The
that
Schomburg's not housed by anybody.
the Schomburg Institute, where Arthur Schomburg's papers are housed. That's not. Come on, man.
You're
That's
missing
not.
my
That's,
point.
no, you're missing my point.
No, you're missing my point.
My goodness, because
The
now
point
you're
I'm
giving me
making,
Temple University. Like, bro,
the
like,
point
are you
I'm making,
serious?
yeah, I'm dead serious. You got to listen.
Go ahead, man.
So the point I'm making is that basically, if Black people don't have our own institutions, then we're not talking about anything intergenerational. We're not talking about anything national. We keep talking about getting microphones across the country. We're talking about mobilization.
No,
That's what
we
we're talking
ain't.
about.
We're not. I'm not talking about mobilization. I'm talking about points on the board, right? Now, this is how, when you do analysis, right? Since y'all don't like business, let's talk about mathematics, right? We just want to talk about and
Don't get behind
math
this one game.
and math, you have to
Come
make
on, bell curve.
you have to remove outliers, right? You have to make the statement equivalent before you can compare. So here's the comparison. Tariq Nasheed has incorrect values. Based upon his incorrect values,
That
he
come
has an
from
idea to establish an institution which requires resources for the institution to be developed and
where
built.
do his
Right?
values come from?
Okay, we have correct values. Based upon our correct values, we have an idea for an institution that requires resources to be established and built. One of us has been able to build it, and the other has not.
He's
That's
building
what
their
that's
institutions with their
that's
values.
that's what we are comparing. So what I'm saying is those of us who have the correct values, where is it realized? Where is it materialized? And it just comes down to a real assessment. We have
Yeah, where
been
are the
we
institutions that reflect African culture?
oh my goodness. Are you not hearing what I'm saying?
Otherwise, you're
That's
not
the,
building your own people. You're building
that's
your own oppression.
are you not hearing
Tariq
are you not
Nasheed,
hearing what
that's
I'm
what you're
saying?
chasing behind.
I'm
He's not.
saying that the people with the wrong analysis have been able to materialize their concept and we
What,
have
of
not.
oppression?
Whatever you want to call it. The point I'm making is this, and it's real simple. We're ineffective, right? I don't have a problem saying we're ineffective. Okay, baby. It's one on I put mine out there on the
My
on
thing
the
is, if
table.
you embody the
I don't have
European,
a
you're going to
problem being
build
I don't
European
have a
society.
problem being ineffective. Okay, I don't have a problem being ineffective, but I do have a problem staying ineffective. I understand that we're losing. I understand we're down bad. So for me, systemic thinking, I'm going to say, why? I need to understand the problem. I need to do a little bit of trial and error. I need to modify my tactics, my approach, because something ain't working. So to keep doing the same thing the same way and expecting a different result, like that's not intelligent. So it's like that's
The
what I'm
point I was
saying.
going
And
to
I'm
make
gonna
about
go I'm gonna go back to this and I gotta tap off.
the point I
I
was
love
making about
everybody who's up here on this panel. I love
I love you
Brandon.
too,
I
brother, but
love
you don't listen.
Taloa. I love Brother Emo. I love My Speaks. But somebody who
The point I
I
was making is
attempt to
about
model my
immersion. The
work
reason I brought up a
and
library
my
in the
efforts
beginning
off of
is because Black
is
people need to be
Booker
immersed
T.
in our own
Washington.
culture.
And the reason why I say that is because He had a great deal of limitations and had a flawed analysis, but he understood the importance of political ingenuity to maneuver
We will be
among
united in defeat.
an incredible heterogeneous, meaning differentiated group of people to get shit done. He had to work with black people who thought one thing, black people who thought another. But when we talk about institutions for posterity, there's not one right thinking African person today who can compare an institution that they've built for posterity or are building for posterity to the institutions that were actually built by
How
somebody
soon
like
are you starting your history?
Booker T. Washington. No, I'm talking about today, right now. We
Are
can
you
go as far
alienated from before?
we can go as far back in history as you want to go. Let's go as far back as you want to go and look at what black people have built, and let's look at what we're building right now. At what point is something that we've built today or are building today that we can compare it to anything we've built in the past? Go as far back as you want to go.
You said what we're building today?
All right,
Well,
I
who do
love
we think
y'all.
we are?
I know. See, this is what happens with like this is the we get trapped in these circular arguments. I like to make the argument real. I'm not
I made it
uncomfortable.
real.
I'm not
Only Africans are
uncomfortable.
not.
I'm not uncomfortable working with black people who don't think like me because I know that the only way for me to influence
Well,
them
keep trying to work with Clarence
or
Thomas. See what that gets you.
I'm not
when he
trying to
pulls
work
you
with
in.
Clarence Thomas. I'm not trying to work with Clarence Thomas, but like if you want to see, that's you talk about binary thinking. So you're either
Not
Clarence
binary.
Thomas or
I named
Asada.
one
Like
person.
no, there's a whole lot of color in between that. So every black person who's not right thinking is Clarence Thomas. Fuck no. This is the stupidity, right? There's no, every black person who doesn't have my analysis is not Clarence Thomas. I
Go
have
ahead and
enough
work with Ali
intelligence
Missouri.
to figure out who I can work with and on what terms. And with that said, I got my daughter over here. I was supposed to be out at 9, but I gave y'all extra 20 minutes. Y'all wasn't supposed to get fiery Omawale, but that's what y'all asked for, so that's what y'all got. I love y'all. I'll
Love
see
y'all,
y'all
but you straw
tomorrow.
man.
And
You
I'll
was
say
by
that's cool.
straw
That's
man.
cool. That's cool. I'll
You
be
straw man, Dobo.
listen, I'll take it. I'll be the stroll man. It is what it is. I love y'all.
He
I
won't win in the
believe
ring with you.
so I'm gonna tell y'all one thing though. Here's one thing that we got to start doing as a people. Tristan, pardon me, brother Talawa and brother Emo are my brothers. We've had arguments and debates in the past, probably never to this level. But one thing about the other side, other black people who are not mature, we can't disagree without our relationships deteriorating. So, brother Talawa, if I disrespected you in any way in this conversation tonight, I want you to know that I apologize for that because it wasn't my intent, right? That African spirit in me was a little fired up, but like I value our relationship and I value our, differences and perspectives. I know you called me Eurocentric, but I believe still sharp and still. So I'm not sure in that regard. I think that this is
Sorry,
a
you're not
a
on tape.
necessary. I think that this is a necessary friction, right, to advance us forward. So Sister, I appreciate you bringing us on.
Thank
I
you.
love all of y'all, my African brothers and sisters, and I'm out.
Peace.
All right, peace.
So I know you have to go as well, Brandon. So we're gonna wrap up because the conversation was supposed to end anyway at 9 o'clock. But and I appreciate y'all. So I guess, and here's the thing, because I do think that it depends on what level we're trying to do this. So I think we're just talking about two different levels of building. So for me, what it looks like for me building, it looks small. It looks like a plot of land, or some land, a good substantial amount of land, with people who are like-minded, who want to build and raise African-centered children. That's what it looks like to me. Because I'll say this. It's very difficult, especially if you spend a lot of time on YouTube, on social media. It's very difficult to see whether we can actually realistically do this thing on a large scale. So a lot of times it's just like, what are we doing? What are we building? Are we, because there's a lot that goes into building, because I do see like-minded people and I'd be like, man, but they don't live near me. So then I say, okay, who's willing to move? Who's willing to live, maybe not what what society has sold us. So who's willing to live a little less than meager,
Right.
you don't need the mansion and things like that because we have a grind culture that we've been accustomed to. So I
Right.
think that when it comes down to it, we really have to start looking at the people who want to live like me, because everybody does not want to live like my family wants to live. But some people might want to live where they're, I don't know where, but they want to live with more of what, that whole big house and stuff like that. So
Hmm.
that might look different for other people. So I think it's one of those things where I think we can still be, I don't know. So let's talk, let's end there. What does nation building really, what should it really consist of if we are thinking differently? So if I think differently as far
Hmm.
as what it looks like, and you think like I want to live in a 6 bedroom home, right, with two cars, would you consider that to be an essential part to our nation building, or does it look more of, because I know Dr. Marimba Ani, she says complete separation.
Yeah.
So that means separation from white folks. But a
Right.
lot of us, that makes us cringe. Like
That's
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 scary to us. So
the Christians are hooked. It's no.
But even beyond that, though, but even beyond that,
so Brandon, starting with you, because I know you have to get out of here. Tell me what do you think about that?
yeah. So to answer your question, I think I could live with somebody who wants that big house and all that if we have a common mission that we are doing this for our children so that they can compete and not be subjugated in the system. Now, does that come with, kind of still having some Eurocentric values? It doesn't have to, but we're gonna have to figure out a common way for us to live and have a common focus. And I think that if we can't land on that and we can't build relationships, we ain't gonna be able to move forward.
Okay. And Brother Talawa, what about you? Like what did nation building, what should that look like?
Could you go to? I'm just processing my thought.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, let me
Oh,
process a little bit,
Brother Emo, go
if he
ahead.
doesn't mind.
Well, I think I mean, from what I was listening to in the conversation and based on the question you just asked, I really do think that what people need, if they're looking for an alternative to the lifestyle that they've been uh, brought into by the world that they've existed in, then what happens is people need to be immersed and saturated with the culture of their own ancestors. So people like to make fun of people who wear African clothes and do African rituals and saturate themselves with African culture, but you have to immerse yourself oftentimes if you want to understand how to live again as your ancestors once lived. Like sometimes it's hard for people to be in the middle of two worlds,
Hmm.
to exist between, because that's what alienation is. I mean, we are African people, but we live as other people, and that's why we get so confused. So for me, it's all about uh reducing that alienation. It's about immersing yourself in your own culture and becoming proud once again of who you are. And if it's hard to do intergenerationally if you do not have institutions that exist intergenerationally to saturate you and the community you belong to. So that's why the question is always, well, do Christians want to belong to an institution that is focused on African spirituality, African culture, immersion, and things that are distinctly African, because whenever they get involved with things that are distinctly African, they begin to behave like racist Europeans and call it demonic and idolatry and all kinds of other things. So I don't necessarily know. I mean, of course, people have to transition, people have to learn, people have to transition. But at the same time, you know, I think it's the organizational piece is where you can deal with discrimination and exclusion. I mean, I think you're gonna have to exclude and discriminate against certain people, certain kinds of people in your organizations, because certain kinds of people want to take your organization and make it something else.
Right.
I mean, that happened to Marcus Garvey. No, he kicked those people out of the UNIA. So I mean, you got to deal with that kind of history too. So I don't see history as point A and point B. I see
Mm-hmm.
history as a continuum. And basically, the further back you look, or whether it's even recent, you have to use what you know of the past to reflect upon what you understand of today. I don't see that as some highfalutin academic whatever, because the people in academia refuse to do that. So, so I didn't agree with Omawale's idea that just because your analysis is reflective of your politics. It's like you understand a problem based on what affects you. No, so whether you're in school or not, whether you're academician or not, that shouldn't matter. The point is, are you reflecting on history to understand your present and to do something on it? Now, if you look at revolutionaries of the past, then you know what? Are you living the way you could live right now? That's a question for everybody to answer. Not everybody's going to have the same answer. Some people are going to say Malcolm X was 1965. No, I'm not going to live like Malcolm X.
Mm-hmm.
It's 2025. Some people are going to say that. Some people are going to say, well, I'm Malcolm X in 2022. You see,
Mm-hmm.
it's
Yeah.
a different way of thinking. So
Well,
I'll leave it there.
mm-hmm.
Okay. I appreciate Brandon and Emo going before me and process my thoughts. What I will say to more pointedly answer the question, can you build when our people are still, in Eurasian cultural things? I think when we build the institutions and as we get institutionally stronger, the whitenization, the de-whitenization and re-Africanization becomes stronger with all of us. Like I have de-whitenization, re-Africanization to do, but the stronger we get, the more it goes away. It just takes time, right? This thing has been attacking us for 600 years. You're not going to get rid of it in 2 generations. So I think that context is important. And what I want to say, getting into African spiritual traditions and politics and economics, this is why I think values are important. There's a scholar recently passed away, a Christian scholar, a Christianized Kenyan scholar, John S. Mbidi. Um, he made an analysis of African spirituality, which he would have called African religions back in 1970. And he got into the nuances of those religions and all of that, but he had like a it's like when you see a good movie but the ending just gets bad, it's just terrible. His book was kind of like that. I think it's called African Religions and Philosophy. John S. Mbidi. And what my issue was with him, while he discusses the sort of the depth and beauty of African spirituality, he goes on to conclude that because it doesn't have African spirituality is so nationalistic, it's too limited to be universally appealing to other groups of people. Now, John S. Mbidi was not only Christianized, he was also bedroom colonized by a Becky. So he had a snow bunny crisis, to put it in other words. So in it, he's right for the wrong reasons, and he's right for the wrong reasons, wrong for the right reasons. So the fact that he identified the nationalistic orientation of African spiritual systems, that should already tell us that this is what we should be doing, right? That's one way of being tactful, right? I don't agree with Mbidi, but that's a tactful, because they say, well, Bam, you're not tactful. Right. This is a guy telling you African spirituality doesn't make room for me to have a snow bunny crisis because it's nationalist, because that's what gives us the cohesion, the consciousness to unify functionally and organize functionally to, overcome this problem.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's very important in mind. So that nationalist cohesion is going to only come out of our spiritual systems at the end of the day. But we're progressing. It's a transformative process. And I don't think you have to just say, oh, what's there now? You have to really think about what we are building, what we are doing, what's up one. You can't just say what's done. You have to say what's up one, because this is part of the way we think of time and understand things. So yeah. So just be mindful of that, right?
Yeah, so I believe that we all had some great points to the conversation. I think that what happens is we end up getting kind of lost in the what's the saying, lost in the sauce. And so at the end of the day, it's what are we doing, what are we building, and how are we going to get there, because we have to even understand what the institutions are for, who are coming to the institutions. And if we build if we build the institutions, will they come? And so just like Wisdom Bars, he just said deprogramming, it's an intentional work. So I still stick to the idea that anybody who is not doing the intentional work of deprogramming is a danger to the collective. And I think Hanifa just even touched on the book about when he came back to the village, right? Like until he deprogrammed, he he wasn't trusted. And I think that was even something that happened. Those there's a lot of instances in that in history where you had to do certain things before you could be trusted in the community. So that's a thing that I think we need to even realize or remember with people who are religious, because a lot of times with Christianity, I know I was a Christian, so I was an integrationist. Like I wasn't sitting around like thinking like I'm a Christian and I want to be over here, because that is kind of ingrained into the ideology, into it's ingrained in there, like that you're supposed to be one big human happy family. So with that, I think there are some people who might be the quote unquote pro black in certain areas. So they might be pro black in their relationships. But when it comes to actually build, like not even building, but just living their day to day, it's an integration. Their education is integration. They want to be in the white schools. They want their
They're
kids to go.
assimilated.
Right. Assimilation. Right.
So black. I mean, you could be assimilated and be black. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
but can you be assimilated and be African?
That's a good point.
You
Mm-hmm.
see?
Mm-hmm. So I think that's what and I think we're going to constantly have these discussions because we're not there yet. I just believe that we're in a situation where it's do do or die. Listening to Dr. Marimba Ani when she was giving a lecture, and she was saying that we have to get comfortable because the Europeans are already comfortable with the ideal of kill or be killed, but we're not comfortable with that idea, right? So that's a whole different conversation, but I think that there are certain things that we're just not comfortable with, and why. And I think we have a lot of residual just European stuff on us from every way possible. And I always say you got to kill that white man inside of you. And so with that being with that, I think that comes a lot of intentional work, because the daily work is yourself first. You have to rise every day and deprogram from whatever it is. Even your interactions with your children is a deprogramming, because some things that you even do with your children or with your spouse or with your friends, or even just going to the doctor or even going to the store, it's a deep, like something comes into your mind and you just like, why did I just if you're not questioning yourself every day, then you have to understand that you're not necessarily doing the intentional work. That's what my art is, right? You rise and you rise, and at the end of the day, you kind of ask yourself those questions. Did I live up to those principles? And so I think it's very important that we understand that and have those conversations with ourselves, because we have to have those conversations with ourselves before we can have it with our community. Um, I'm gonna go ahead and end the conversation. Brandon, did you have any closing remarks?
Nope.
No.
I said my piece. So y'all take care. I gotta jump. Till
Okay.
next time. Peace.
All right.
Take
Peace.
care, man. Good night.
All right. Peace, Brandon.
All right. And
All
we're
right.
gonna end. I see some people came through. I want to thank everybody for coming through, joining in the conversation. As always, y'all said some amazing things in the chat. I do appreciate Jabril. I would love to have a part two, so I will reach out to the brothers to see if they would be interested in a part two. Next week, I will be ending the kind of the spirituality month. I will be having some special conversations next month. So I'm really excited about next month too. So stay tuned for that. But yes, I think that these are conversations that we have to continuously have. So with that being said, thank you so much everyone for coming into the conversation. And thank you, Brother Emo, for jumping in. I appreciate you for jumping into the conversation last minute. Any closing remarks?
No,
No,
have a good
no
night.
closing. Brother
Good night,
Talawani.
everybody. Shemotep, everybody.
Okay, all right, everyone. So
Oh wait, closing remarks. You said.
yeah, go ahead if you have
Oh
anything to
yeah.
say.
Just one last propaganda point. We need our African spiritual systems to restore our sense of sacredness. Only then can we have the unity that we need to build the institutions that we need.
Mm,
It's just that
thank
simple.
you.
I agree.
Yeah.
Jacob Carruthers said that.
So with that being said, I'm going to end it there. Peace, family. I will see you next time.
Peace.